Hi, I'm Delphine. And my parents didn't just disown me, they evicted me with a note taped to the fridge. After a 12-hour night shift, after fixing the roof at 4 a.m. in the rain, I came home to trash bags stuffed with my clothes and a message. You're dead weight. Get out. No warning, no conversation. They replaced me with my brother, erased me from photos, drained our accounts, forged my name to steal the house my grandmother left me. Now, I'm fighting for something they never wanted me to have. Not the house. The truth. But how do you prove a family meant to erase you? Never really saw you at all? It was just past 4 a.m. when I pulled into the gravel lot behind the logistics center, the same way I had every night for the past 4 years. The light drizzle had turned into a soft, constant rain. My boots were soaked from walking through the loading dock earlier, and my shoulders ached from lifting crates no one else wanted to touch. Scranton nights in April weren't forgiving, especially not when the chill soaked through the seams of your jacket and clung to your bones. I rubbed the back of my neck and muttered, 1 hour, just one solid hour of sleep. My phone buzzed as I slumped behind the wheel of my truck. The screen lit up with a message from Mom. Leak in the roof again, dripping over the stove. You need to come. No, please. No, hope you're okay. Just another task. I stared at the message for a second, blinked hard, then pulled the truck into gear. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than they needed to. I didn't even question it. I just drove. That's what you do when you're the one left to keep everything together. When you're the one no one says thank you to, but everyone expects to show up. The rain picked up as I parked outside the house. Our house. My house, technically. Though you wouldn't know it by how they treated me. The porch light was off. The entire place was dark, save for a dim glow from the kitchen window. I grabbed the ladder from the side shed and climbed onto the roof with a flashlight clenched between my teeth. The wind was sharp and mean. The shingles near the stove vent had shifted again, just like last spring. I used duct tape and tar to patch what I could, my fingers stiff and numb. My palms scraped against the rough edges, splitting open in thin red lines. The rainwater mixed with the blood. I didn't even flinch. At this point, pain just felt like part of the uniform. By the time I climbed down, it was nearly 5. My hair clung to my face, plastered by rain and sweat. I stepped through the back door and into the kitchen. The faucet dripped in rhythm, tick, tick, tick. Mom sat at the table, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I fixed it, I said, peeling off my wet jacket. But you should probably have someone check it properly when the weather clears. She didn't look up. Okay, that was it. No offer of tea, no towel, no gratitude. Just okay. I didn't even have it in me to argue. I mumbled something about needing rest and shuffled into the living room, too drained to bother going upstairs. My boots stayed on, my damp clothes stuck to the couch cushions as I collapsed into the closest thing I could find to comfort. I dozed off fast, dreaming of summers past, ones where Grandma still sang while she cooked, where Orenthal and I rode bikes down the hill by the park without thinking of who owed what to whom. In my dream, there was no debt between us, only air and laughter. When I opened my eyes again, the sunlight was already peeking through the curtains. I sat up slowly, body aching. The silence in the house felt wrong. Still. Too still. 3 black trash bags sat in the hallway. They weren't there when I'd closed my eyes. One of them had my favorite flannel poking out the top. My backpack leaned against the wall, unzipped and empty. I stood, heart thudding. My boots hit the floor harder than I meant. I walked into the kitchen. The note was taped to the fridge with a strip of electrical tape. You're dead weight. Get out. No name, no explanation, just that. My wallet lay open on the counter, cash gone. My ID still there, which felt like a twisted kindness. The fridge still hummed, oblivious. My knees buckled slightly, but I didn't fall. I pressed one hand to the counter, the other shaking as I picked up the note and turned it over. Blank. Like the space they'd cleared for me in their lows. No footsteps, no voices. Just the echo of silence where a family used to be. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. My heart screamed for this to be a prank, a moment of miscommunication. But deep down, I knew. They'd planned this. I whispered into the emptiness. Did you really mean this? My voice barely made a sound. I grabbed my keys off the hook by the door. My boots were still damp from earlier. I didn't change. There was nothing left to change into. I stepped out onto the porch. The bags were already outside, neatly stacked beside the steps. The same porch I'd repainted 2 summers ago. My truck was parked exactly where I left it, as if waiting to drive me out of a life I no longer belonged to. I walked to it slowly, opened the door, and slid behind the wheel. I turned once, glancing at the house. Then I knocked. Just once. No answer. No one peeked through the blinds. No door creaked open. Just rain, again. I got into the truck, closed the door, and stared ahead. My hands trembled as I slid the key into the ignition. I turned the key in the ignition, but I didn't know where to drive. I spent the night curled up in the front seat of my truck, parked at the edge of a 24-hour grocery store lot. The engine had gone cold hours ago, and so had the coffee I was nursing from a styrofoam cup I didn't remember buying. My lower back throbbed, and my knees ached in the cramped position I'd folded myself into, but I didn't move. I didn't want to feel awake. Awake meant remembering. A soft knock on the window startled me. A teenager, maybe 17, stood outside holding a grocery bag, her face scrunching with cautious concern. "You okay, ma'am? Do you need help?" I gave her a tight smile and waved her off, muttering something like, "I'm fine, just resting." She nodded and walked away, but I saw the look in her eyes. I wasn't a woman with a story. I was a cautionary tale. To her, I looked like someone who'd given up. I unlocked my phone, thumb hovering over Mom's contact. The thread was still there. The last message, her demand about the leaking roof. I tapped call. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. So I did the thing I told myself I wouldn't. I texted, "Mom, just want to talk, please." Almost immediately, the message bounced back. Number blocked. I didn't cry. I didn't have the bandwidth to. Instead, I opened the messaging app where we used to have the family group chat. The name still popped up, Home Team, but I wasn't in it anymore. For a few minutes, I just sat there, staring at the screen, wondering if I had imagined everything. Then I made the mistake of opening Facebook. There she was, Pamela, with her ever-so-composed smile, standing beside Orenthal in front of the backyard grill. The caption above the photo read, "Family means everything. So proud of my son for coming home." I zoomed in without realizing. My old bike, my 10-speed with the faded stickers from Girl Scout camp, was in the corner of the picture, painted navy blue. Orenthal's favorite color. They hadn't just tossed me out. They'd filled the space I used to occupy with someone they deemed more worthy. I was being overwritten, like I never fit into the story to begin with. The next blow came from someone who meant no harm. "Hey, Delphine," my coworker Joanna messaged. "Saw your folks had a cookout. Surprised you weren't there." There was a link. I shouldn't have clicked it, but I did. A wider shot this time. Mom, Dad, Orenthal, some neighbors I hadn't seen in years. Everyone holding plastic cups and laughing. My spot at the patio table was taken by a dog bed. The caption, "Rebuilding with those who matter." The phrase twisted in my chest like a rusted blade. The people I used to make meals for, clean up after, stay up late sewing buttons for. They'd gathered and toasted and celebrated. Without me. I found myself at a laundromat an hour later, standing in front of a washer with a load of clothes I didn't need to wash. Some old jeans, a t-shirt from college, and a flannel I barely wore. I dumped in detergent, inserted quarters, and just watched the drum spin. A girl nearby argued with her mother about something trivial. School clothes, maybe. The mom's voice was sharp but not cruel. The girl rolled her eyes and walked off, and the mother followed after her. I kept my gaze low, but I felt it rising. That bitter envy. Not at the fight, but at the fact that the mother had chased after her child. No one chased after me. I sat on the cracked orange bench, pulled out one of the shirts from the dryer, and started scrubbing at an invisible stain. Over and over, just to keep my hands moving. Maybe disappearing was easier for them than admitting they pushed me out. That thought didn't feel like anger. It felt like fact. Later, back in the truck, I looked again at the Facebook photo. Orenthal's smile was wide, confident, like someone who'd landed exactly where he thought he belonged. Mom stood beside him, her expression soft and proud. That particular tilt of her head, I hadn't seen directed at me since I couldn't remember when. I touched the screen gently, as if doing so could answer the question whispering through my mind. Was it always supposed to be him? I needed answers, even if I had to go back to where I wasn't wanted to get them. The coffee tasted bitter, even with the extra cream. I stirred it more out of habit than anything else, sitting in a booth near the back of a small cafe that offered free Wi-Fi and no questions. My phone sat on the table, screen cracked but functional, as I attempted to access the shared family cloud folder. The same one where we'd stored birthdays, holidays, and every mediocre casserole photo from the past 15 years. Access denied. I stared at the message for a beat, then tried again, slower this time. Same response. The email tied to my access was no longer valid. I took a deep breath, not because I needed air, but because I needed to not throw the phone. "You okay?" the barista asked as she passed by, a pitcher of refill coffee in hand. I looked up, managing a polite nod. She smiled gently. "Refills on the house. You look like you've seen ghosts." I gave her a tight thanks and turned my attention back to the phone. Ghosts would have been easier. Ghosts don't delete you from folders and group chats. I opened Facebook, hoping to find something, anything, that would make me feel like I hadn't imagined my life. My finger scrolled past a few local posts before I searched for a family album I'd created back when Mom first learned how to upload photos. It was gone. I checked another. Delphine's graduation 2012. Also gone. One more. Summer cabin trip. Still there. But I wasn't tagged. Every photo of me was still visible, but I had been untagged like I was someone passing through, not someone who had helped organize the trip, bought the snacks, driven the car. I clicked into the photo. There I was, smiling under a ridiculous straw hat, standing between Mom and Orenthal. My arm around her waist. Her hand was cut off in the crop. That old saying from the barista floated back into my mind. Something I'd heard before, but never felt so literally. They can delete pictures, not memories. Unless they delete you, too. I logged out and set the phone down. Later that day, after drifting through a few thrift stores looking for nothing in particular, I walked into a pharmacy to buy toothpaste. As I waited in line, I heard someone say my name. Delphine? It was my cousin Sierra, her hair in a high bun and sunglasses perched on her head indoors. We exchanged a short hug, the kind that doesn't warm anything. "I just saw that video from the family chat, Orenthal doing that terrible impression of Uncle Hank. I laughed so hard I choked on my cereal." I blinked. "What video?" She tilted her head. "You didn't see it? It was hilarious. It's been bouncing around the group chat all morning." I smiled, because that's what we do when we're not sure what else to do, and made a quick excuse to head to the restroom. Inside the stall, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. The family group chat wasn't listed. I checked the app again. I hadn't muted it. I had been removed, weeks ago. They hadn't even needed a dramatic exit, just a quiet deletion. Simple, clean. The worst part? It worked. I walked from the pharmacy straight to the church I hadn't set foot in since my grandmother's funeral. I didn't go inside. I couldn't. I sat on the concrete steps, staring at the familiar wood of the front door. The same door I had opened every Sunday as a child, holding Marcel's hand. The bells rang out the hour, echoing across the town like they always had. But they didn't sound like comfort anymore. As families passed by, smiling and holding hands, I sat there, completely invisible. I wasn't forgotten, I whispered to no one. I was chosen to be erased. The words felt heavier when spoken aloud. Somewhere inside me, a crack widened. Being ignored is worse than being hated. It means you're nothing. And I wasn't nothing, not to me. Not anymore. As the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows on the church sidewalk, I knew I was done asking for space in stories that no longer wanted to include me. That night, back at the truck, I opened a new cloud folder. I named it Delphine's Proof of Life. The first image I uploaded, a photo I had taken of myself on the roof at 4 a.m, arms smudged with tar, cheeks streaked with rain and sweat, smiling into the lens despite the ache. A small act, but it was mine. Unfiltered, unedited, undeniably present. A ping broke the silence. A message from Loretta, my old neighbor. You might want to come by. Something's happened. I had no home, no place, but I still had one last thread tying me to the past. Loretta's kitchen still smelled like cinnamon and pine sol. It hadn't changed in years. Same yellow curtains, same faded linoleum that curled near the fridge. She handed me a chipped mug with coffee that was stronger than kindness, but warmer than anything I'd felt in weeks. I almost didn't tell you, she said, wiping her hands on her apron like she always did when nervous. Didn't know if it was my place. I looked up from the steam curling over the mug. Tell me what? She sat down across from me, folded her hands. Last week, I ran into your mother in the bread aisle at the market basket. She was talking to that notary fellow, the one with the wandering eye. She didn't see me, but I heard her say, he doesn't need to know as long as the papers are clean. Then she said something about transferring the property. I didn't blink, didn't breathe, just nodded. Loretta leaned in. Delphine, I'm sorry, but it sounded like something that ain't right. I didn't say anything, just finished my coffee, thanked her, and left. That afternoon, I drove past the house, not with the intention to confront, but to retrieve what I'd left behind. I parked across the street, watched the front window. A shadow moved. The blinds twitched. I took a breath and walked up to the door. Orenthal opened it. His eyes narrowed like he had hoped I wouldn't show. Pamela's out running errands, he said, stepping just far enough to block the doorway. I offered a pleasant smile. I just need to grab a few old documents. I won't be long. He didn't like it, but he stepped aside. I walked in like I belonged there, which, legally, I still might have. The kitchen was the same, tidy, clinical. It always had this sterile feel, like no one cooked in it, only staged their lives around it. I moved to the cookbook shelf, slowly, like I was browsing for Grandma's meatloaf recipe. Behind the row of dusty binders and index cards, something white peeked out. An envelope. Unmarked except for 2 words scribbled in blue ink. Transfer agreement. I slid it free, heart pounding, but fingers steady. I unfolded the pages on the kitchen counter, smoothed them flat. The title leaped out, Quitclaim Deed. And there it was. My name, next to Orenthal's. Only the signature next to mine wasn't mine. I stared at it. The loops were too neat. The D curled too high. It looked like someone trying too hard to forge something they never understood. The date? 2 weeks before the night they threw me out. I took a photo with my phone. Just one. Then carefully refolded the papers and slid them back where I'd found them. No confrontation. Not yet. That night, I sat in my truck with my old phone, the one still logged into our joint bank account. I tapped the icon. It spun for a moment, then asked for login credentials. Invalid. I tried again, locked out. I called the bank. After 10 minutes of waiting and a barrage of security questions, the representative's voice finally came on. Looks like the account holder removed your access on the 10th. I'm sorry, Ms. Beaumont, but your name is no longer associated with this account. The 10th. That was the day before Pamela texted me about the roof. I hung up. They didn't just kick me out. They'd scrubbed me clean from the financial picture. Quietly, permanently, I sat in silence, the dashboard clock blinking past midnight. Then I turned on the overhead light and started listing everything I knew. Dates, details, documents. This wasn't about begging for a place back at the table. This was about proving who that table really belonged to. I wasn't out for revenge. Not yet. I was out for truth. Back at the cafe the next morning, I opened my email and created a new folder titled Start Here. I uploaded the photo of the forged signature and attached it to a blank message addressed to myself. Subject line, Start Here. I hit send. Then I whispered to the screen, "They think this ends with a signature. They have no idea who I am." The next morning, I made my first call. To someone who used to help people like me fight back. The text came in just after noon on a Tuesday. Dinner this Friday, family only. No hello, no signature, just that. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakable. Pamela had switched phones again. Her way of shedding the past, pixel by pixel. I stared at it for a long while. The phrasing stuck with me. Family only. That was the knife twist, not the invitation. For a second, I thought of deleting it and pretending it never arrived. But curiosity has teeth, and mine had been gnawing at the silence too long. I needed to see what they'd look like when they saw me walk through the door, whether they'd flinch or smile. By the time Friday came, I had rehearsed a dozen versions of the evening in my mind, none of which included arriving to find 5 chairs around the dining table when 6 were clearly expected. I stepped into the house unannounced. No one greeted me. No one turned to say they were glad I came. It felt like I'd wandered into a staged photograph, not a family gathering. Orenthal sat at the head of the table, dressed like he'd just walked out of a menswear catalog. Pamela floated between the kitchen and the table, placing dishes as if this was her kingdom, and we were merely subjects. My name wasn't on any of the place cards, but Orenthal's was, centered in bold script, just above where Mom had placed the roast. We ate in near silence for the first few minutes. Forks clinked, glasses refilled. A few safe comments about the weather floated around. I didn't touch my plate. Then, like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat no one asked for, Pamela lifted her glass and said, "I want to make a toast." Every head turned. "I just want to say how proud I am," she began, her gaze locking onto Orenthal, "for stepping up, for being the man this house needed." She didn't look at me. Not until the next line. "Not everyone's built for responsibility. Some people crumble when it gets too heavy." A soft chuckle bubbled from one of the cousins. I didn't even register who. I stood, napkin still folded in my lap. "Did you call me here to eat silence?" My voice cut the air cleanly. Everyone froze. Pamela blinked once, slowly. Orenthal smirked, but said nothing. I looked around the room, let the moment settle. No apology came, no explanation. Just eyes that wouldn't meet mine. I didn't bother staying for dessert. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck and opened Facebook, needing something mindless to distract me. That's when Joanna's message came through. "Hey, is this your old desk?" She sent a link. Pam's Clean Out Finds was the page name. A photo of my childhood desk sat under the caption, "Fresh start, clearing space for growth, great condition, no holds." My bookshelf was listed below it. Same one I built with Grandpa back in high school. The carvings we made into the side, ours and Grandma's initials, had been painted over in white. They told me those things were in storage. They were selling my past for $40 apiece. My fingers curled around the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned pale. But I didn't cry. The next morning, I stopped by the Goodwill downtown. It smelled like dust and old carpet, but I wasn't looking for comfort. I walked the aisles until I found it. A chipped mug with a faded pink rim. "Best daughter ever," it read. I'd made it in 5th grade art class and given it to Pamela on Mother's Day. She kept it on her windowsill for years. Now it was priced at 99 cents. I bought it. Back in the truck, I placed the mug beside me, snapped a photo of it with the marketplace listings, and filed them under a new folder on my phone labeled Proof. Every piece they tossed, I whispered, will be another nail in their credibility. I was halfway through organizing screenshots when a ping interrupted me. An email had landed in my inbox, my old account, the one I thought they'd stopped using. It was from Orenthal, or rather meant for someone else, a real estate agent. I'd been mistakenly CC'd. Subject: transfer finalized, she's out. No greeting, no context, just confirmation. I didn't know if they thought I was stupid or broken, but I was neither. I was just done waiting. I was sitting in the public library, tucked in the back corner where the outlet actually worked and the Wi-Fi wasn't spotty. My laptop was open, half a dozen tabs up. Screenshots of the fake deed, copies of emails, notes I'd written to myself in the margins of scanned PDFs. I was building something, quietly, steadily. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Wyatt, one of the warehouse guys I used to swap shifts with. "Your brothers live again. You might want to see this." My stomach dropped before I even clicked the link. The stream was already a few minutes in. Orenthal's face filled the frame, all confidence and faux humility, sitting in what was unmistakably his dining room. Behind him, the wall clock ticked loudly, and that cursed oil painting of a rooster hung crooked, same as always. "We had to make some tough calls, yeah," he was saying, between sips of something expensive. "But you can't carry dead weight forever. Eventually, you gotta cut it off before it sinks the whole ship." Comments streamed in, laughing emojis, clapping hands. One asked, "Is she watching this?" He smirked, glanced at the camera like he knew the answer. "She left. Well, eventually." In the background, Pamela appeared, passing through with a casserole dish, smiling like this was just another Sunday. My mouth went dry. They were broadcasting this like it was a show, like I had been a plotline, a complication they'd heroically overcome. A ping alerted me that the stream was being clipped, shared. They were turning my life into a punchline. No context, no voice. Just their version, polished and public. They made me the villain to justify the theft. I muttered to myself, hands clenched around the phone. I closed the laptop. I couldn't sit there anymore. It was late afternoon when I pulled up in front of the house. The light had shifted, shadows stretching across the yard. My heart beat evenly, not with panic, but with purpose. I rang the doorbell once, then again. Finally, Orenthal opened the door. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. "You're not welcome here." "I just need something from my room," I said calmly. "Legal documents, from before." He didn't budge. "I'm documenting this for protection," he added, pulling out his phone. "Don't flatter yourself," I said. Then he stepped outside and called the cops. "She's trying to break into our home," he said, loud enough for the neighbors watering their azaleas to hear. When the officers arrived, I was already standing at the edge of the lawn, hands visible, demeanor steady. They asked for my name, my relationship to the property. I answered each question without flinching. The taller officer glanced at his notepad. "Technically, the title's shifted. If the current resident doesn't give permission, we can't let you in." "That house was mine before it was his stage," I said, voice sharp as glass. They handed me a printed trespass warning. I accepted it with a nod. As I walked back to my truck, my steps didn't falter. My face didn't change. But something inside me crystallized. Later, I sat in a booth at Betty's Diner off Maple Street, the kind of place where coffee gets poured without asking, and the waitress knows everyone's kids' names. I spread everything across the table, my evidence, my timeline, my next steps. An older man at the next booth eyed my files. "You fighting family?" he asked. I didn't answer directly. He nodded anyway. "You need someone who knows how to handle folks who smile while stabbing. Look up Frank Alder, downtown. He's been through fire." I took out a pen, wrote the name down. They'd taken my house. Now I'd take back the truth. Back at the motel, I snapped a photo of the trespass warning with my ID beside it. attached it to an email with the subject, Fraudulent Property Transfer, Request for Legal Counsel. I stared at the blinking cursor for a moment, then hit send. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about accountability, and I had just begun. The law office smelled like old books and fresh ink. Clean, deliberate. Frank Alder didn't waste time with small talk. He had already reviewed everything I emailed. The forged deed, the live stream clip, the trespass notice. "We can build a case," he said, his voice steady but not cold. "But you need to be stone. No outbursts. No pity plays. You let the facts speak, and we frame them right." I nodded once. "Stone's all I've got left." We shook hands, his grip firm but brief. As I walked out of his office and back onto the busy street, the world felt quieter. Not calmer, just paused. Like everyone around me was on some track I no longer belonged to. That illusion broke when I got back to my motel and found a letter shoved under the door. A pale blue envelope, my name, handwritten. I opened it, expecting some last-ditch plea. It was a utility bill, final notice, overdue. The address? My former home. The one they kicked me out of. The account name? Mine. I called the number listed on the bottom, my voice calm only because I'd practiced being hollow. "Hi, I received this notice, but I haven't lived at that address in over a month." The woman on the other end asked for account verification, then politely said, "Ma'am, you're the primary account holder. You're responsible." I stared at the ceiling. "Pamela said she'd moved it to her name." "Well, it appears your name was never removed. We've been billing the registered account holder." "Which is me." "Yes, ma'am." I didn't argue. I just hung up. They'd erased me from the dinner table, the group chat, the walls, but left my name on the bills. I folded the letter, placed it into the file I now carried with me everywhere, and drove straight to the house. I didn't knock this time. Pamela opened the door, her face unreadable. Behind her, Orenthal leaned against the banister, that same smirk from the livestream still glued to his mouth. "I'm not here to argue," I said, handing her an envelope. "Just delivering this. A formal request to remove my name from all accounts, property records, everything." She took it without looking. "We already removed you from the family. That was enough." "You can't remove me from what I built," I replied, steady. "You built what, exactly?" Orenthal chimed in, eyes gleaming. "You patched a roof. Big deal." I didn't look at him. I looked at her. "I want this done legally, or I will take it further." Pamela didn't blink. "You'll do what you do. Just remember, you don't come from strength. You were always sensitive." I turned to leave. And that's when it came. "I gave birth to you," she said softly, almost as if to herself. "But I don't choose to keep you anymore." Orenthal chuckled. "Finally, she says it." I froze, just for a moment. Then I pulled my phone from my pocket, thumbed the record button, and said clearly, "Thank you." I didn't look back. Back at the motel, I wrote in my journal, "She didn't cut me off today. She freed me to cut them off." Later that night, Frank called. "Court date's set, 3 weeks from now." I let the silence linger before answering. Let's play their game, but on my terms. Then I opened my laptop, composed a formal cease and desist notice addressed to Pamela. BCC'd a contact I'd found earlier that day, Scranton Legal Watchdog, a local newsletter that specialized in family disputes and shady estate transfers. I clicked send. The next time they'd see me, it wouldn't be at the front door. It would be across a courtroom aisle. The Scranton County Courthouse was smaller than I remembered, tucked between the post office and a bail bondsman's office that still had a blinking neon sign in the window. It was just before 9 a.m. when I stepped through the metal detector. Frank Alder beside me, his leather briefcase worn at the corners like a well-used weapon. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with the low murmur of observers. Small-town trials always drew eyes, especially when it involved old money and fresh betrayal. Pamela sat at the petitioner's table, calm as ever in a navy blazer too stiff for her personality. Orenthal beside her wore that smug, full-mouth smile that made you want to scrub the air around him. I didn't acknowledge either of them. I held only one thing, an old photograph of me and my grandmother Marcel, her arm around my shoulder, both of us laughing in front of the porch she built with her husband's hands. Tucked behind the frame was the will. Frank whispered, "No emotion today, just facts." I nodded. The first witness called was Loretta. She walked with her cane like it was an extension of her spine, upright and sure. She adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat before speaking. "Marcel told me many times that house was for Delphine. Said it plain as day. That girl stays. That girl gives. She's the one who never asks for nothing." The judge leaned forward. Pamela's lawyer, a man whose tie had more confidence than his argument, rose for cross-examination. "You're saying this was a verbal agreement?" he asked, as if her age made her memory unreliable. "I'm saying," Loretta replied without blinking, "that when a woman like Marcel says something more than once and lives like it's true, it matters more than any notarized paper your client claims to have." Frank didn't object. He didn't need to. When she stepped down, Frank approached the bench and opened a slim envelope. "Your Honor," he said, "we present the handwritten will of Marcel Delaney. Dated. Signed. Witnessed." He laid it flat on the podium. The judge adjusted his glasses. I watched Orenthal pale. Pamela's fingers twitched under the table, one tapping against her thigh. Frank read aloud, "To my granddaughter Delphine, for her steadiness and care, I leave my home, so she may always have a place that is hers." A wave of murmurs rippled through the gallery. Pamela's lawyer moved to object, citing authenticity concerns. The judge raised a hand. "We'll have it examined by court-appointed verification, but the signature appears consistent." Then Frank looked at me. A small nod. I stood. "They didn't just take a house," I began, my voice even. "They tried to erase the years I gave. They scrubbed me from photos, family records, legal rights. They painted over my presence and called it a renovation." I held up a laminated photo, the one of me on the roof at 4 a.m., rain-soaked, tool belt slung around my waist, half smiling through exhaustion. The judge reached for it, turned it over. On the back, I had written one line: "A daughter who climbed in the rain so her family didn't get wet." No one spoke. Not even Orenthal. The judge closed the file. "We'll recess for review. The court will issue a preliminary ruling tomorrow morning." As we stepped outside, Pamela avoided my eyes. Orenthal stormed out without a word, his gait stiffer than usual. He wasn't used to being on the wrong side of a headline. I sat on the courthouse steps, letting the sun land on my face. I didn't smile, I just breathed. "If they were still human," I said quietly, "they'd feel shame. But maybe shame is too noble for some." Frank sat beside me, his briefcase between us, like a silent witness. "We just cracked their spine," he said, adjusting his coat. "Tomorrow, we rip the binding apart." And for once, they'd have to sit and watch while I spoke. And the world listened. The blinds in my motel room let in that sharp, colorless morning light that made everything look worse than it was. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, listening to the buzz of the fridge and the drip of a leaky faucet. My phone hadn't vibrated all night. No calls, no texts, no apologies. But I had 8 notifications from reporters. I got up, pulled on the same jeans I'd worn for 3 days, tied my hair back, and looked in the mirror above the sink. My eyes looked like they belonged to someone who had walked through a war and wasn't sure if the battle was over or just changing terrain. Today, the judge was supposed to deliver the ruling. I didn't expect celebration. Just an end. On the drive to the courthouse, I stopped at a red light and opened a message from Joanna. It was a TikTok link. I almost ignored it. My nerves didn't need another hit. But I tapped anyway. There it was. Orenthal's livestream, chopped and remixed. Subtitles across the screen read, "Dead weight saves roof." Someone had turned his smug comments into a trending meme. One clip zoomed in on his face as he said, "We had to cut her loose," then cut to a picture of a woman on a roof in the rain, duct tape in hand, with the caption, "Cut this!" The comments were brutal. Imagine kicking out the only one who actually kept your roof from collapsing. This man built nothing but his ego. Even the local station had picked it up, running a short segment titled, "Estate Disputes Go Viral. Who Really Owned the Home?" My phone buzzed again. Someone had tagged me in a comment. I ignored it. Outside the courthouse, I stepped out of the car, straightened my coat, and walked toward the doors. That's when a woman I didn't recognize approached me. Mid-50s, holding a reusable grocery bag. "Excuse me," she said with a smile. "Aren't you the housemaid from that video?" I blinked. For a second, I couldn't even form a response. "I used to be the owner," I said. "Or maybe I still am?" She nodded politely, oblivious, and walked on. That's how the world framed me, reduced to a background role in a story I built from the foundation up. Inside the courtroom, the tension was subdued. The air was cooler. Frank sat beside me, flipping through notes with the same methodical calm he always carried. The judge entered, and we rose. She didn't waste time. This court acknowledges the submitted will of Marcel Delaney as verified and legally binding. As such, we grant Ms. Delphine Beaumont temporary custodial rights of the property pending final estate distribution. Orenthal shifted in his seat. Mr. Orenthal Beaumont and Mrs. Pamela Beaumont are hereby ordered to vacate the property within 72 hours. Pamela didn't react. Her eyes never met mine. Orenthal clenched his jaw, nostrils flaring, but didn't speak. No apology, no retraction, just court orders and a quiet shuffle of papers. Frank leaned over. "You got your house," he said softly. "You just didn't get your family." I nodded. "I never had them, not really." Afterward, I returned to the house, not as a guest, not as a trespasser, but as the legal occupant. I brought a locksmith with me, and within minutes, the locks were changed. The door clicked shut with a satisfying finality. The inside smelled different, cheap cologne and synthetic candles. Every trace of my childhood had been wiped. No framed photos, no hand-sewn curtains from Marcel. But when I walked into the garage, I saw it. My old red toolbox, dusty but untouched, sitting on the shelf where I left it. They'd taken everything they could brag about, left the things that held real value. I sat on the porch for a while, staring at the cracked pavement, the flower bed overgrown with weeds, a house full of echoes. Later that night, I opened the file folder, Marcel's will, the court order, and the new deed. My name sat at the bottom. I ran my fingers across the print, then whispered, "Time to add one more line, one they can't erase. Not everyone who breaks you deserves to be remembered. Some just deserve to be forgotten." I walked into my old bedroom, half expecting it to smell the same. But it didn't. They'd painted the walls, some muted beige that had none of the warmth I remembered. The bed was gone. The bookshelf had been replaced by a trendy dresser that didn't fit the house. But the closet door still creaked the same way when I opened it. I reached for the top shelf, brushing aside a pile of plastic hangers and what looked like a broken Bluetooth speaker. Tucked behind an old shoebox was something else, smaller, heavier. I pulled down the box. The lid fell open with a quiet puff of dust. Inside were things I hadn't seen in years. Letters I wrote and never mailed, notes from teachers, a dried flower from prom tucked into a folded napkin. And then there it was. The locket. Gold-plated. Oval. Worn but intact. Marcel gave it to me the day I got accepted into community college. She had held it in her palm, like it weighed something holy. "This belonged to my mother," she said. "Now it's yours. Keep it close." I sat on the floor with the box in my lap and unfolded a wrinkled piece of notebook paper. Lined, smudged. My handwriting, age 16. It was a letter I had written to Marcel during one of those nights teenage girls think will destroy them. "I know I'm not like Orenthal," it began. "He's shiny. He always says the right thing. But I'm the one who stays up. I'm the one who keeps the lights on when the storms come. Why doesn't anyone see that? I read the whole thing aloud, my voice catching only once. I just want someone to see me before I disappear. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. That girl had cried enough. I folded the letter back into the box and stood up. As I passed the hallway, I saw Pamela's door was slightly ajar. On her dresser, resting like a trophy, was the locket. My locket. Except she'd turned it into a keychain, stripped the chain, attached it to a leather tag that read, Legacy. Legacy. Weeks ago, I had seen a photo on her Instagram. A family heirloom passed down for strength. Hundreds of likes, comment after comment saying how classy she was. I took it back, without hesitation, without guilt. Back in the living room, I gathered 3 things: the letter, the locket, and the old red toolbox from the garage. I didn't touch the dishes, or the couches, or the shelves full of decor meant for show. I wasn't here to collect what was theirs. I was here to reclaim what was mine. I came here to recover me, I said to no one. Not them. That night, I sat on the floor of the room I used to sleep in, now stripped to bare wooden walls. I opened my phone and pressed record. I didn't plan the words. You erased me from your dinners, your holiday cards, your stories. But I'm still here, still standing, still remembering. I stared into the camera, no filter, no makeup, no facade. And unlike you, I never needed an audience to be real. I saved the recording, not to post, not to share, just to keep. A timestamp on a moment where silence stopped being strength and became survival. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Frank. His voice was steady. The estate hearing is finalized. It's yours. Officially. Completely. I held the locket in my hand, pressed it to my chest, and nodded. But before I closed the door on them forever, there was one more name I needed to erase. Legally. The attic was the last place I hadn't opened. Every other room had been combed through, sorted, or sealed shut. But the attic, Marcel's attic, still held the same air it always had. Dry dust, cedar, old linen. A place where time had folded itself and waited for someone to notice. I pulled down the ladder and climbed slowly, each step groaning like it remembered more than I did. The light bulb flickered to life, casting a soft yellow across boxes, bags, and a single trunk with Marcel's initials etched into the leather. Next to it sat a plastic crate marked with Orenthal's name. I knew it before I even saw the labels. Orenthal, piano recital. Pam's 40th, VHS tapes stacked and labeled with care. I flipped through them, one after another. Not a single one had my name. But tucked in the back, half covered by a folded blanket, was a lone tape. Thanksgiving, 2004. I slid it into the dusty VCR and hit play. The screen buzzed. A shaky shot of the kitchen appeared. Marcel stirring sweet potatoes, Orenthal fiddling with the TV remote. Off camera, my voice. Can I try now? No answer. Just silence. Then static. I ejected the tape and sat there a while, the old blanket across my lap. Later that morning, I stepped outside to check the mailbox. Bills, junk, and a small envelope, handwritten. It was from Mrs. Dunley, our neighbor. Inside, a note. Thought you should know. I remember your father saying once, that girl's not like the rest of us. He said it like a compliment, but sometimes I wasn't so sure. I stared at the paper, reading that line over and over. She's not like anyone else. I'd heard it as a kid. From teachers, family friends, strangers at church. It always hung in the air like perfume. Pleasant at first, but overbearing the longer it lingered. I never knew if it was pride or warning. I pocketed the note and walked the perimeter of the house. Gutters sagged, paint peeled. The lawn was patchy and bare in places. It was clear no one had cared for it, only claimed it. I called a contractor. I need a wall taken down, I said. The one between the front sitting room and the den. The man paused. You remodeling? No, I'm removing a boundary. By noon, I sat with Frank in his office, My legal letter sat on the desk between us. I had signed it that morning. It read, "I decline any further inheritance. I relinquish all emergency contact roles. I request no contact from any party named herein. Permanently." Frank looked it over, then at me. "This isn't common." "Neither is being disowned by a smile," I said. He slid the letter into a folder and said nothing more. That evening, I returned home and pulled open a drawer in the sideboard. Tucked inside was a letter I'd written to my father after my high school graduation. One I never sent. "Dear Dad," it began, "you clapped louder for Orenthal than you ever did for me, and still, I hoped one day you'd see me for more than who I wasn't." I read it once, folded it neatly, then walked to the fireplace. The flames danced quietly. I dropped the letter in. It curled, blackened, and disappeared. Not everything needs an answer. Some things just need to burn. I turned off the lights, locked the front door, and stood in the darkened foyer, ready to sleep in a house that was finally mine. In silence I chose. Just as I turned the lock, a knock echoed through the wood. I hesitated, hand still on the deadbolt. I looked through the peephole. It was Loretta. She said nothing. She simply held up a small cloth bundle in her arms. Some people return not to reopen the wound, but to offer the bandage you never expected. Loretta didn't say a word when I opened the door. She stood there in her Sunday shoes, holding a small velvet bundle wrapped carefully like it might break if anyone breathed wrong. I stepped aside, and she walked in without waiting for an invitation. That's how it was between us now. No pretense, just understanding. She placed the bundle in my hands. "They threw it out with a bunch of frames," she said, eyes scanning the room like she was checking for ghosts. "But I thought, maybe you'd want it." I unwrapped the cloth. It was the photo. Me and Marcel on the front porch, both of us sun-kissed and wind-blown from that long weekend we spent repainting the swing. The frame was cracked, the photo itself smudged at the corner. But I remembered the day clear as breath. I didn't cry. I didn't thank her out loud. I just nodded, wiped the glass with my sleeve, and set it gently on the table. The next morning, I dressed in quiet determination. Slacks, blouse, no makeup. My truck had been freshly serviced, not because it needed to be, but because I needed something in my life to feel dependable again. At the county clerk's office, I filled out the paperwork with deliberate care. The woman behind the counter squinted at the form. "You're changing your last name back to Delaney?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Reason?" "They gave it to me to erase me," I replied. "I give it back to rewrite myself." She didn't ask again. That afternoon, I returned home with paint, a hammer, and a single brass nail. I repainted the wall in the living room, not the whole room, just one patch. The same shade of green Marcel used to say reminded her of Appalachia summers. When the paint dried, I rehung the photo. Dead center. It didn't straighten the room. It didn't fix the broken corners of what had been done. But it recentered something in me. "This house forgot me," I whispered, pressing the nail tighter into the wall. But I never forgot who made it home. Weeks passed. One afternoon, the mailman dropped a package and a stack of envelopes at my door. The return address, Orenthal and Pamela, legal documents, apologies, requests for reconciliation. I placed them in a fire-safe box, locked it, filed it under, unopened. "They're not mine to read," I said aloud. "Not anymore." These days, I split my time between volunteering at the shelter and patching roofs with Habitat for Humanity. My hands are never idle. I've come to see that fixing broken things isn't a punishment. It's a kind of grace. Turns out, the real curse isn't mending. It's trying to repair people who take pride in remaining shattered. One evening, I received a notification from the clerk's office. The deed had been officially updated. The house now legally bore my new name, my old name. I printed it out, sat down at the dining table, and signed. Then I paused. Beneath the signature line, in small, neat cursive, I wrote, "In memory of Marcel, who gave me a roof before I knew I needed one." This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. Hello, my name is Verity, and I woke up in a hospital bed with burns on my arms and my stepfather crying at my side, saying my mother was gone. But the real burn came seconds later when a detective leaned in and whispered, "Are you ready to know the truth about him?" What truth? That my mother had planned to leave him? That she'd signed divorce papers? That he changed her life insurance? Right before the fire? They all said she died in the blaze. But what if she didn't? What if she died, waiting for someone to open the door? And what if the people I called family weren't mourning her, but protecting him? Would you want to know more? Would you be able to look away? When I opened my eyes, the light above me hummed like it belonged to a world I hadn't returned to yet. White ceiling, sterile air, a dull ache spread across my ribs and back. Something beeped near my head, slow, steady, mechanical. I turned slightly. Tubes were in my arms, my lips dry under the weight of an oxygen mask. It wasn't a dream. I was alive. But the house, our house, it wasn't. My brain fought to arrange the pieces. Smoke, screaming, heat pressing down like it had claws. Then, nothing. A void. And now, this bed. I tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. My body ached like it had been dragged through a storm and stitched back together with cheap thread. The door creaked open. Silas. He stepped in slowly, as if walking into a church, shoulders sagged, hands twisting a worn baseball cap. "I didn't know if you'd wake up," he said. His voice trembled. "Verity, I'm so sorry." He came closer, pulling a chair to my bedside. I watched him through the fog of medication and memory, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. He took my hand with both of his, held it like it might vanish. "Laurel," his voice cracked. "Your mom didn't make it." A cold wave surged through me. My lips parted, but nothing came. Not a scream, not a sob. He started to cry, at first quiet, then shaking, body bent as if he were breaking in half. Tears fell onto my bedsheet. It wasn't performative, not overtly. It was messier than that. Real or rehearsed, I couldn't tell. My body wanted to believe him. My heart wanted something else. "I was there," he said through tears. "I tried, Verity. God knows I tried." I turned away, staring at the window, though I couldn't see past the blurry pane. What was he doing before the fire? Where was he? And why did this feel so off? Later, the nurse, Rosa, her badge said, adjusted my IV and said I could have a visitor. I nodded. A different man entered, not a friend, not a relative. He wore a brown leather jacket and carried the quiet weight of someone who'd seen too much. His eyes moved carefully across the room before settling on mine. "Miss Dane," he said, voice low. "Detective Royce Halden." "I'm handling the case on the house fire." I blinked. My heart picked up speed again, not because of him, because of the word case. He stepped closer, stopping beside the foot of the bed. "I won't keep you long. I just needed to say something before the others do." I nodded slowly. "Okay." He glanced toward the hallway, then leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you ready to know the truth about him?" A chill ran through me, deeper than anything the hospital air had managed. My breath caught. "Him?" His eyes didn't waver. "Silas." My lips parted again, but no sound came out. Just breath. Just questions. They tumbled inside me like a dam breaking. Was he implying Silas caused the fire? Lied about something? What hadn't I seen? I didn't answer. He stood straight, gave a polite nod, and stepped back. "We'll talk when you're stronger, but I needed to look you in the eye first." After he left, I lay there, still. Long enough for the machine to beep slower, like even my heart needed to pause. Memories teased me, fragments trying to align. My mother's voice yelling from another room, the crackle of wood, a photo frame melting on the nursery wall. Me, reaching for the doorknob and pulling back, burned. Smoke that tasted like metal, and Silas. Not in front of me, not behind me, not anywhere. Where was he? They'd said it was an electrical fault, that fires could move fast in old houses, but I remembered heat swelling through the walls and my mother screaming my name. Why couldn't I remember more? The door creaked again. Silas, back again. You need to rest, he said softly, placing a folded blanket at the end of the bed. I'll let the nurse know if you need anything. I nodded, pretending to relax. Don't worry about anything right now, honey, he added. Everything's being handled. That last part stuck to my skin like a rash. Handled. He left, and the door clicked shut behind him. I didn't trust myself to sit up fully yet, but my hands were steady now. I reached for the small call button, but hesitated. What would I even say? Instead, I watched the window as dusk settled outside. Laurel was gone. Silas was grieving, so they said. Detective Halden wanted me to know the truth, but I had a feeling I'd have to dig it out myself, and I would, not because I wanted revenge, but because something was wrong, and I wasn't the kind of woman who sat quietly while someone rewrote my life for me. I turned my face toward the window again. The city lights blurred like distant promises. Yes, I whispered to the glass, to the dark, to no one. I want to know everything. The hallway outside my hospital room buzzed with movement. Nurses exchanging notes, carts squeaking on polished floors, the hum of fluorescent lights casting shadows longer than they should have been. But inside my room, everything stood still. I hadn't moved since whispering those words to the glass the night before. I want to know everything. The weight of them settled in my chest like stone. Detective Halden returned the next morning, just after breakfast was cleared from my tray. I hadn't eaten much. Couldn't. My stomach had been caught in a knot ever since Silas's tear-soaked visit. Halden knocked once, then stepped inside without waiting. He didn't smile, didn't soften his tone. I have something to show you, he said, pulling a plastic evidence sleeve from the folder he carried. He placed it gently on my lap. Inside was a photo. It was my mother's watch. I recognized it instantly. Narrow gold band, a chipped face she refused to replace. It still works, she'd always say, but this one had stopped. The hands were frozen at 3:17 a.m. The report says your mother died at approximately 2:40, Halden said, but this was recovered from her wrist by the coroner. Intact, the glass didn't even crack. I blinked at the image. My throat tightened. Accidents don't stop time after someone's declared dead, he continued, which means either the timeline is wrong or someone wanted it to look a certain way. The way he said someone sent a cold ripple through my body. I'll leave this with you, he added, sliding the folder onto the bedside table. We're not officially saying anything yet, but you need to see where things don't line up. He turned to leave, then paused. He's coming by again today, isn't he? Silas? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Halden nodded once. Just keep your eyes open. He was right. And I hated how much sense it made. By the time Silas returned that afternoon, I had stared at that photo so long I could have drawn the watch from memory. He walked in holding a folded quilt in one arm and a cup of herbal tea in the other. Thought you might want something more comforting than hospital sheets, he said, unfolding the quilt and laying it at the end of the bed. This was Laurel's favorite. She always said it smelled like home. He sat down in the same chair as before, rubbing his hands together like he was cold. The room was warm. I keep thinking about that night, he said, voice soft, controlled. If I'd just come back downstairs sooner, maybe I could have... He trailed off. I didn't interrupt. I let the silence stretch. People fill silence when they're nervous. Silas didn't. He just watched me like he was waiting for something. Finally, I asked, "Were you with her when she passed?" He shifted, barely. "No," he said slowly. I was talking to the EMTs, trying to make sure they knew where everyone was. It all happened so fast. Too convenient, too carefully worded. I gave a slow nod, then looked toward the clock on the wall. The second hand ticked steadily forward, unlike the one in the photo. He changed the subject quickly, asked how the nurses were treating me, if I needed him to bring anything from home. I smiled just enough to keep him from asking questions. He left 20 minutes later, promising to return tomorrow. As soon as the door clicked shut, I exhaled, deep, controlled. Then Rosa came in. The nurse was younger than most of the others, probably just out of training, but her voice was calm, certain. "Can I ask you something?" she said, glancing over her shoulder before stepping closer. "A couple days ago, did you have family try to visit?" I blinked. "Besides Silas?" She hesitated, then nodded. "There was a woman, older. Looked like she could have been your aunt or something, said she was your grandmother." My heart thudded. "Maribel. She was here for hours," Rosa said, "but someone revoked her visitor clearance. Said it wasn't good for your recovery." "Who?" "I don't want to get in trouble," she murmured. "But he said you needed peace, that anything upsetting would delay your healing." I didn't have to ask who he was. Silas had kept her away. From me. From whatever Laurel might have left behind. My body went still. Everything sharpened. I wasn't just recovering from a fire anymore. I was waking up from something far more dangerous. Years of manipulation I never saw coming. I thanked Rosa. She gave a small, sympathetic nod, then quietly left. Alone again, I picked up the folder Halden left. My mother's watch stared back at me, its hand still trapped at 3:17. What else had been done for my healing? What else had been kept from me? I tried to recall the last months before the fire, the tension between Laurel and Silas, the way she'd brush off my questions. "Don't worry, honey. It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Silas had always known how to play the room. Make himself useful, essential, kind. People trust a man who cooks dinner and mows the lawn, who attends church and remembers birthdays. But Silas also never let my mother speak for herself. At family dinners, he answered questions directed at her. He'd clarify her opinions, twist her words into the ones he preferred, and when she'd correct him, he'd laugh it off like she was overreacting. He'd done it for years. I just hadn't realized. Until now. I sat up straighter, wincing at the pull in my side, but I didn't care. I reached for the hospital notepad beside my bed and began to write. Dates, names, phrases he'd used, moments that hadn't added up before but made awful sense now. I wasn't ready to accuse anyone yet, but I could track the gaps. I could build a map. They had erased one visitor. Who else had they erased? I tapped the photo of the watch. "You died at 3:17, didn't you, Mom?" I whispered. So why did he lie about it? I stared at the photo of Mom's watch on my bedside table long after the sun dipped beneath the horizon. It haunted me. Not just the fact that the hands were frozen at 3:17 a.m., but the way no one seemed to question the discrepancy. Not Silas, not the doctor. No one but me and Halden. It was like everyone had quietly agreed not to touch the cracks in the story. The nurse came in one last time to check my vitals, then dimmed the lights. I lay back, my body sore, but my thoughts sharper than they'd been since I woke up. I didn't know where this was going, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was investigating. I must have dozed off for a little while, because when my phone buzzed on the tray table, it startled me. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen since the funeral arrangements were finalized. Ophalie. I hesitated, heart fluttering in a strange rhythm, before answering. Her voice came through soft, syrupy, like nothing in our family had burned to ash. "Hey, Verity," she said, sweet but calculated. "I heard from Silas that you're awake. I wanted to give you some space, let you rest." "Thanks," I replied cautiously. "That's considerate." She didn't respond right away. Then, "I just wanted to check in. I know things are complicated, but please, don't let people stir up trouble. You need rest, not rumors." There it was. Her tone didn't slip, but her message was clear. "Rumors?" I asked. Ophalie sighed, lightly, as if I were exhausting her with my confusion. "Silas has been through so much. We all have. You weren't there. And it's easy to let your mind spiral when grief sets in. You weren't there. That one hit deep, but I didn't let it show." "I'm not spiraling," I said evenly. "I'm just trying to understand some things." "Well," she said in that same syrupy way, "some things don't need to be understood. They just need to be put to rest. That's how we heal, Verity. The audacity nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. She kept talking. He was the only one with her. At the end, don't take that away from him. It's all he has now. I stared at the ceiling, mouth slightly open, my jaw tensed. Do you believe everything he says? I asked, keeping my voice calm, almost casual. I believe he loved her, Ophelie replied. More than most people ever get to be loved. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I realized something. She didn't just believe him. She needed to. If he was lying, it would mean she'd built her loyalty on sand. We hung up not long after, and I lay there in silence, the words, "You weren't there," echoing in my ears. They had the same weight as, "You don't know what really happened." Convenient phrases to push someone out of the room. Later that night, after the lights dimmed again and the halls grew quieter, I found myself staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them like I used to count stars when I was little and couldn't sleep. Back then, Mom would hum lullabies from the hallway, thinking I didn't hear her. I always did. That night, I remembered our last fight. It was 2 months before the fire. We sat across from each other in her kitchen, cups of chamomile tea between us, untouched. "You can't keep living like this," I'd told her. She looked tired, not angry, just drained. "It's not that simple," she said. "Yes, it is," I snapped. "You leave. You start over. You don't let someone shrink you until you're unrecognizable." She looked down at her mug. "You don't understand. It's not just me anymore." "You mean Silas?" I asked. "Or the image you've built around him?" That stung her. I saw it in the way she flinched, even though she tried to hide it. "I love him," she whispered. "In my way." "Then love yourself more," I said before standing up and grabbing my coat. I didn't look back. Not that time. I'd sent her a birthday card 3 weeks later. She never responded. The silence after that fight had never sat right with me. I told myself she was busy, that life got in the way. But deep down, I knew better. I wasn't there when she needed me. But maybe, just maybe, I was the only one who ever tried to tell her the truth. Back in my hospital bed, I clenched the blanket tighter. I wondered if Ophelie had ever had a conversation like that with Mom, or if she'd just smiled and nodded, pretending everything was fine. Some families run on denial, like it's gasoline. In the morning, I was discharged. Silas offered to pick me up, but I declined. A nurse helped me into a cab, and by noon, I was sitting in my apartment again for the first time in over a week. The place was just as I'd left it, quiet, organized, untouched. But I was different. I moved slowly, stiff from the fire in the hospital, but I made it to my desk. I opened my notebook and wrote 2 headings across the top of the first page: his story and what I know. Under his story, I started listing everything Silas had said. She was already gone when he found her. The fire started in the kitchen. There was nothing more he could do. Then I made a list of what I know. Her watch stopped at 3:17. Rosa said someone blocked Maribel from visiting. Halden doesn't trust him either. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to make a scene. Not yet. But I wasn't going to sit in the dark either. They wanted me to be quiet. That wasn't going to happen. Later that evening, I tried to video call Ophelie again. She answered on the second ring, her face perfectly made up, background blurred. "Hey," she said, with a smile too bright. I studied her features, the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine on the screen. We talked for a few minutes, surface-level stuff. She asked about the hospital food, I asked how work was, but I could feel the tension in every syllable. "Did you know Mom was thinking of leaving him?" I asked, casually. The screen froze for half a second, then caught up. Ophelie blinked. "No," she said, voice tighter than before. She never said anything like that to me. But something shifted. Her smile flickered. Her eyes darted to the side, like someone had just walked past her off camera. I caught it. I paused the call on my end, staring at her frozen face. Even her face was lying. But not for long. The call had ended, but my thoughts hadn't. I sat there in silence, the apartment too still, too clean, like it was holding its breath. Ophalie's frozen expression lingered on my phone screen. Her eyes hadn't met mine once during the conversation. People don't look away when they're telling the truth. I closed the laptop, stood, and stretched. My body still ached in odd places, a reminder that no matter how sharp my mind was becoming, my physical self was still healing. I moved slowly to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and stared out the window as the day transitioned into evening. The world outside looked normal. I was the one out of sync. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud. 2 soft raps, deliberate and short. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door to find no one. I blinked, stepped out to check the hallway, and found only an envelope lying on the welcome mat. No postage, no writing, just plain brown with a slight bulge. I picked it up, padded, heavier than a regular letter. Back inside, I laid it flat on my desk, took a deep breath, and peeled it open. Inside was a photo and a small USB drive. The photo came first. A grainy still from a security camera. The timestamp in the lower corner read 1:45 a.m. The image showed a man I knew too well, Silas, walking across the downstairs hallway of our home. He had something crumpled in his hand. Paper, maybe a letter. His posture wasn't panicked. If anything, it was too calm. He paused by the stairwell, looked over his shoulder, and then tossed the paper down into the shadows below. My hands began to tremble. I set the photo down and reached for the USB, plugging it into my laptop. The video file loaded quickly. No password, no label, just one clip. I watched in absolute silence. Silas moved slowly through the frame, glanced toward the stairwell, then hesitated. It was that pause, brief, calculated, almost theatrical, that chilled me. He looked right at the camera, then turned, dropped the paper, and walked away. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the screen went black. That footage hadn't been in the police file. My pulse kicked hard in my throat. I reached for my phone and called Halden. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Verity?" he said, voice rough like he'd just come off another call. "I got something," I said. "You need to see it." "Tell me." I explained quickly, concisely. The envelope. The photo. The USB. His silence on the other end wasn't surprised. It was heavy. "That's the raw file," he said. "We were told that camera was disabled. Supposedly it shorted during the fire." I sat up straighter. "They lied to you." "Yeah," he said flatly. "They did. Don't confront him yet. Not until I can validate the footage and match the timestamp." "I'm not confronting," I replied. "I'm compiling." We ended the call, and I sat there, staring at the paused video frame. Silas's face wasn't clear in the image, but his posture was. His entire demeanor radiated someone cleaning up, not someone grieving. The envelope hadn't come with a note, which meant someone out there wanted me to see this, but not to know who they were. A neighbor? A friend of Mom's? Maybe even someone inside the system who'd had enough. I replayed the clip again and again, watching for anything new. Then I noticed something strange about the paper he dropped. A glint of gold on one edge. Just a sliver, but enough. I shut the laptop and went to my closet. In one of the boxes tucked high on the shelf, I found what I was looking for. An old stationery set Mom used for special letters. Cream paper, thick and soft to the touch, with a gold trim that shimmered when it caught the light just right. It matched. She wrote something that night. And he destroyed it. Except he didn't destroy it completely. That clip, that photo, that was the paper mid-flight. It had to be recovered. It had to exist somewhere, even charred, even torn. I sat back down, heart beating faster than it had in days. Not from fear, from drive. They had erased her voice, and now they were trying to erase mine. I clicked open my folder, titled plainly, Truth, and began dragging files into it. The watch photo. Rosa's statement about Maribel being blocked from visiting. The voice notes I'd taken, summarizing Silas's version of events versus what I could confirm. I began compiling everything. No detail was too small. The way Silas had spoken at the funeral. How quickly he arranged the cremation. The fact that no one had seen the contents of the bedroom after the fire. Every lie was a thread. I was pulling them, one by one, and the fabric was starting to rip. I saved copies to a cloud drive. Another copy to an external hard drive I'd hidden in my closet months ago, back when I thought being careful was just paranoia. Turns out, it was preparation. Grief used to paralyze me. Now it fueled me. I opened a new document and started typing notes about Silas's behavior the week before the fire. His moods, his meetings, his excuses. Mom had seemed withdrawn, yes, but also like she was preparing for something. Maybe she had been. The way she spoke on the phone days before. Calm, but measured. "I'll be okay, Verity," she'd said. "Just, if something happens, you know where the old files are." At the time, I thought she meant old tax returns. Now I wondered if she'd been telling me something else entirely. I closed my eyes, sat back, and let the pieces sit in my mind. Silas was careful, always was, but even careful men leave footprints, especially when they start to panic. When I finally shut the laptop, the apartment was bathed in moonlight. I hadn't noticed the transition from dusk to night. Time had folded around me. I looked once more at the still image from the video. Silas, mid-step, mid-lie. "I don't need to catch him red-handed," I whispered. "He's already bleeding truth." The room was quiet again, but the silence no longer felt empty. It was full, crackling with intent, loaded with everything I had uncovered so far. My laptop was still open on the table, the folder marked Truth growing heavier with each passing day. Every file, every note, every photo, pieces of a story someone had worked hard to bury. I had just begun to stand and stretch, intending to make tea, when another knock sounded at the door. A single, steady rhythm. Not Silas. His knock was always softer, more hesitant now. This one was deliberate. I opened the door to find Maribel. My grandmother looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were steady, her mouth tight. She didn't say hello. She simply held out a folder wrapped in aging twine, the edges frayed like something passed between generations. Without waiting for an invitation, she stepped inside. "Your mother gave me this," she said, voice raspy but firm. "Told me to keep it safe. Said if anything happened to her, you should be the one to read it." My throat tightened as I took it. The weight of it wasn't just physical, it was something else, something final. I nodded and gestured toward the kitchen. We moved slowly, as if any sudden movement might rip a hole in the moment. I set the folder down on the counter, untied the string, and opened it. Inside were a few documents, some handwritten pages, and a notarized form. I scanned the top sheet and froze. It was a completed divorce petition, dated 3 weeks before the fire. My heart pounded as I read the lines. Laurel Dane requesting legal separation from Silas Grenville. Reason listed, irreconcilable differences. She'd included her own statements, personal and sharp. In the margins, her handwriting in red ink curled around the edges like warnings. "He'll try to stop this. Keep it hidden." The last page stopped me cold. It wasn't official, just a note in the same ink. "I want the house. Let him keep his lies." Tears welled up before I could stop them. Not because I was sad, because I was furious. She had made a plan. She had taken a step. And someone had made sure that step was her last. Across the counter, Maribel stayed silent. She didn't have to say anything. She already knew. "How long did you know she was leaving him?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "She told me after your last visit," she replied. "She said you were the only one who had the guts to say it out loud. She didn't want to worry you, thought she'd handle it quietly." I swallowed hard. "She was going to wait until after your birthday," Maribel added. "Said she didn't want to ruin that day for you. Said once you were settled again, she'd file." My birthday had been the day after the fire. I didn't speak. I couldn't. "She even wrote a letter," Maribel continued. "A goodbye of sorts. She said she'd leave it out, in case things went wrong." That letter. The paper Silas had tossed in the footage. I'd seen that crumpled edge. I knew that handwriting. "He needed her gone before she could act," I said quietly. Maribel didn't respond. I gathered the documents and walked them into my bedroom, laying them out beside my laptop. Then I returned to the kitchen, poured 2 cups of tea, handed one to her. "She almost made it out," I said after a while. "She almost did it." "Yes," Maribel replied. "But someone made sure she didn't." The sun had dipped low by then, casting gold through the windows, turning the room a soft amber. I looked around and realized just how much my apartment felt like hers. Plants near the sink, books in uneven piles, candles not meant to be lit, just placed. After Maribel left, I stared at the folder again. It was worn, but it had made it, just like Mom had hoped. I sat down, took a deep breath, and opened a fresh page in my notebook. I didn't call Ophelie. I thought about it, sure. I thought about showing her the documents, the signatures, the notes, but I already knew how that would go. She probably wrote that in a moment of anger. We don't know if she really meant to file. This doesn't prove anything. They didn't want the truth. They wanted quiet. Instead, I began writing my own list. Not just of what Silas had said, but what I could prove he had done. Paper trails, insurance dates, timeline inconsistencies. My pen moved fast, my mind sharper than it had been in years. I didn't care if it took days, weeks. I would line everything up, neatly, clearly, undeniably. I opened the folder and slipped the divorce petition into my file labeled Truth. My fingers lingered on the corner before I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. "You tried to leave, Mom. You almost made it. I won't let him bury that, too." I sat there for a long time after Maribel left, the folder still open in front of me, its contents spread across the table like puzzle pieces from a life someone had tried to burn. Outside, the morning fog was lifting slowly, revealing a pale sky above Eugene that never really promised sun, just a brighter shade of gray, the kind of sky that makes you feel like something's about to break open. I'd barely taken a sip of coffee when the knock came again. This time, softer. A rhythm I knew too well. Silas. I stood still in the middle of my kitchen, staring at the door, letting the silence stretch longer than was polite. Then I opened it. He stood there holding a brown paper bag and a coffee cup, all charm and ease. "Bagels and coffee," he said, lifting the bag like an offering. "Thought you might not feel up to cooking." He didn't wait for me to invite him in. He just stepped across the threshold like he still belonged in my life. I closed the door behind him, watching how casually he placed the bag on my counter, like he knew every corner of the kitchen. His gaze moved around the room, pausing just a second too long on the folder at the edge of the table. "The place looks good," he said. "Looks like you're feeling better." I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out a chair and sat down. He followed, placing the coffee in front of me. He launched into small talk, how the garden was a mess without Laurel's touch, how the neighborhood was asking about me, how everyone missed seeing your light. Every word calculated, just enough warmth to mask the control. I let him talk, my hands resting quietly in my lap, my expression unreadable. After a few minutes, I tilted my head slightly and asked, "Did Mom say anything to you the night before?" His voice faltered for just a fraction of a second. "What do you mean?" he said, reaching for the coffee. "I mean," I continued, keeping my tone calm, "did she mention anything important? Something she was planning to do?" He looked away, then back, the smile returning, but slower this time. "She was tired," he said. "Worried about you. But no, nothing specific." I nodded slowly, giving him space to hang himself with his own rope. "She said something to me," I replied, tone still even. "Something she wanted to do." He went quiet, just for a breath. Then he smiled again and changed the subject. 15 minutes later, he was gone. I didn't touch the bagels. Once the door clicked shut behind him, I exhaled. My hand went immediately to the side drawer of my desk. I pulled out the evidence bag that held Mom's old phone, recovered after the fire. I had kept it untouched until now. It powered on, barely. I navigated through the old messages, voice memos, notes. Most were normal, shopping lists, half-recorded reminders. Then I found it, a voice memo saved as a draft. It hadn't been sent. Maybe she hadn't gotten the chance. Maybe she knew it would be found eventually. I hit play. Her voice filled the room, shaky but unmistakably hers. The kind of voice you don't forget even if you try. "Verity," she said, "if something happens, don't trust him." He changed the documents. I sat there frozen. She sounded tired, like she'd already run out of fights. But beneath the fatigue was something sharper. A warning laced with disappointment, but not in herself, in him, and maybe, in me. I listened to it again, then a third time, until the edges of her voice started to fray in my ears, and my eyes burned from the sting of holding too much in. I transferred the audio file to my computer, backed it up twice, then dropped it into the truth folder. I added it to the growing archive, photos, documents, notes. Then I sent a copy of everything to a secure drive, and another to a burner email address I'd made that morning. Then I drafted an email to Detective Halden. Subject: urgent, new evidence. Body: I need to meet. I have voice confirmation. Timeline's tighter than we thought. She knew. I didn't send it yet, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted everything perfect. I took a break, walking slowly to the kitchen. I filled a glass with water and stood at the sink, looking out at the street below. The truth didn't set you free. That was a lie. What it did was make you brave enough to walk into the fire you'd been avoiding. Later that evening, when the world outside had gone still again and the apartment was bathed in soft lamplight, I sat at my desk and opened a fresh notebook. Not digital, not saved to a cloud, just pen on paper. I wanted to forgive him, I wrote, because forgiveness is easier than confronting the full weight of betrayal. I wanted to believe someone, anyone, would do the right thing without being cornered. But no one protected her, so now it's me. I didn't cry right away. I wrote until my fingers cramped, until the words ran out. Then, in the quiet, I let the tears fall. Not the wild kind, not dramatic. Just a slow, necessary letting go. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was remembering. Before bed, I played Mom's voice one last time, let it echo through the speakers, soft and resolute. Don't trust him. He changed the documents. I leaned close to the speaker, whispering back like she could still hear me across the space she'd left behind. Don't worry, Mom. I heard you, and I won't stay silent. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, but because I was focused. The voice memo from Mom played over and over in my mind, even after I turned the volume down and the screen went dark. Don't trust him. He changed the documents. It didn't matter how softly she said it. Those words cut sharper than anything Silas had ever thrown at me with a smile. By morning, I was already dressed when the knock came. This time, it wasn't a visitor. It was a delivery, an envelope stamped from the county courthouse. My name printed in clean block letters. I knew before I opened it that Silas had made his next move. I tore the seal, skimmed the legalese, and felt my stomach turn. He had filed for an injunction, citing emotional distress, claiming I was harassing him, making baseless accusations, disturbing the peace of a grieving household. Grieving household? He was trying to flip the script, paint me as the crazy one. The irony of it all made me laugh. Quietly, bitterly. I held the paper in one hand and grabbed my phone with the other. Within minutes, texts were rolling in. Are you okay? I saw your name in the Eugene Ledger. I didn't know it got this bad. I'm here if you want to talk. Some were from people I hadn't spoken to in months. A few from neighbors who had always smiled at Silas, waved at Laurel, and pretended not to notice the tension that lived between the porch steps. Then came the article. Local news had picked up the injunction. The headline, Grieving Husband Seeks Protection from Stepdaughter's Claims. In the photo, Silas wore that same soft-eyed expression he used at church, the same one he used at my mother's funeral. I didn't see my name until the second paragraph, but there it was, described as unstable, volatile, struggling with her mother's passing. And the worst part? Ophalie had given a statement. She's under a lot of stress. I think she needs time, not headlines. That was it. No denial, no defense, just a gentle push toward the door. Harlan. He didn't speak to the media. He just posted a cryptic message on social media. Blood doesn't make a family. Loyalty does. I didn't reply. Instead, I waited. At noon, Royce Halden knocked on my door, holding a manila folder. "I figured you'd want to see this in person," he said, stepping into the living room. He opened the folder and slid out 2 sheets of paper. "This wasn't supposed to be public record yet," he said, "but it was leaked." He pointed to the header. "A life insurance policy, Laurel Dane, updated 3 weeks before the fire. Beneficiary, Silas Grenville." "You think he found out she was leaving him?" I asked. "I think he didn't want to lose control," Royce answered. "And now that you're getting closer to the truth, he's trying to paint you as a threat." I nodded slowly, the fury settling deeper. "You can't file something like this and still pretend to be innocent," I muttered. "He's counting on you reacting emotionally," Royce warned. "Don't give him what he wants." I waited until Royce left before I pulled out Mom's second phone, the one Maribel had kept in her dresser drawer, wrapped in scarves, like it was sacred. I charged it, opened the voice messages. One file, unsent. Labeled for Verity. I hit play. Her voice was softer this time. Tired. She knew she was running out of time. "Don't trust the file he shows. The real ones are hidden at my mother's." I sat there, breath caught in my throat. She had hidden copies. Not at the house, at Maribel's. Within the hour, I called her. "Grandma," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Mom said she left something with you. Something important. She called it the real ones." Maribel didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'll bring them over." By dusk, I had the files in hand, documents that showed the original insurance policy, her name, her intent, her signature, next to dates that proved Silas changed everything. He wasn't just lying, he was erasing her. I sat with that thought for a long time, heart pounding. Then I opened my laptop, found the clip of her voice, trimmed it down, added subtitles. "Don't trust him." That's all I needed. I posted it to my social media with a simple caption, "There's more, and I'm not scared anymore." Within minutes, it was shared, dozens of comments, some asking questions, others thanking me. Many were shocked, some even apologetic. Then came the private messages, one from a former neighbor, another from a church friend of Laurel's, then an old co-worker of Silas's, all saying versions of the same thing. I always thought something was off. He never seemed that broken up. She looked scared the last time I saw her. I felt something shift. The wind wasn't just pushing against me anymore. It was moving with me. I opened my camera, stared into the lens, and hit record. This time, you're not erasing her. Or me. The morning air was sharp, colder than it had been all week. I pulled my coat tighter around me as I stepped out of the car, folder in hand. The courthouse loomed ahead, tall and impersonal, like it had seen too many families shatter under its roof. This time, it would see someone held accountable. People were already filing in, journalists, spectators, people who claimed to be friends of the family. I kept my eyes ahead. My heels echoed through the hall as I walked past the check-in, through the metal detector, into the chamber that would hold every lie Silas had ever told. And finally, it's unraveling. When I entered the courtroom, whispers rippled through the gallery. Some people looked away, others stared too long. None of it mattered. I took my seat next to my attorney and placed the folder on the desk in front of me. Inside, Mom's voice recording, the notarized divorce petition, the insurance policy files, and the still frame of the crumpled letter. Silas sat across from me, a picture of grief and dignity. His gray suit was pressed, his wedding band still on. He offered no glance in my direction. Ophalie was beside him, her expression unreadable. Harlan leaned back in his chair, arms folded, not looking at anyone. He always had a way of pretending he wasn't part of things, even when he was deep in them. The judge entered. We stood, sat, and the session began. Silas's attorney rose first. His voice was smooth, practiced, the tone of a man who dealt in stories more than facts. "Your Honor, my client has endured unbearable loss," he began. "He lost his wife of over 20 years and now faces cruel, baseless attacks from the very person he tried to protect, Mrs. Verity Dane, the stepdaughter, has been spreading unfounded allegations, attempting to destroy the reputation of a man still mourning. I clenched my jaw, staring straight ahead. Silas took the stand. He leaned forward, hands clasped tightly like a man ready to open his heart. "I loved Laurel," he said, voice shaking just enough. "She was everything to me. I've done nothing but try to preserve her memory." He turned slightly toward the judge. "I didn't expect Verity to spiral like this. Grief does strange things. She's confused, angry. But these accusations, they're dangerous, and they're hurting the people who are still trying to heal." There it was again, confused, unstable, fragile. The judge nodded solemnly, even leaned in a little. For a second, I felt the weight of the courtroom shift toward him, just like he wanted. Then my attorney stood, calm, steady. "Ms. Dane," she said, "please approach the stand." I rose, folder in hand, and crossed the room. I could feel Silas watching me now, not with sympathy, with calculation. My lawyer opened with the basics: my name, my relationship to Laurel, the timeline of events. Then she asked the one question that changed the entire atmosphere of the room. "Do you have any evidence to support your claims?" I opened the folder. "The day before the fire," I began, voice clear. "My mother recorded a message. She didn't send it, but it's real." I handed the flash drive to the bailiff. It was played over the speakers, her voice filling the room. "If anything happens," Laurel said, "don't let him twist it." A gasp, then silence. I continued, pulling out the divorce petition. "She was planning to leave him. It's notarized, dated. She even wrote a note in the margin: 'He'll try to stop this.'" I handed it to the judge. He took it slowly, brows furrowed. Then came the final piece. Royce Halden stepped forward. "I was the investigating officer on the fire," he stated. He pulled out another file. This footage was retrieved from a home security camera. It shows Mr. Grenville walking past the laundry room. That room was locked. Inside, Mrs. Dane was alive. The medical examiner confirmed she died of smoke inhalation hours after the fire started. The judge turned sharply to Silas. "Why didn't you call 911?" he asked. Silas didn't answer. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. My heart beat hard against my chest. Ophelie stood. Silently, she walked out of the room without looking back. Harlan looked down, jaw tight, but said nothing. Silas finally spoke, voice low. "She was leaving me. She made me nothing." I leaned forward, just enough for only him to hear. "And now you are." The judge ordered a recess. Silas's attorney didn't object. He looked defeated. The gallery buzzed with murmurs. I didn't care. Outside, the cold hit harder than it had that morning. But this time, it felt clean. I pulled my coat tighter and whispered, more to myself than anyone else. "You died locked in, Mom, but I set you free." The gravel crunched beneath my boots as I stepped off the path. The wind had softened since morning, carrying with it the scent of earth, pine, and something faintly floral. The cemetery stretched in quiet symmetry around me, headstones casting long, stoic shadows in the Sunday light. I held a single white rose, simple, clean, just like she would have wanted. Laurel Dane, mother, teacher, fighter, was buried beneath a stone that hadn't yet been updated with truth. It still read wife, no mention of the woman who had tried to break free, the woman who had left behind warnings for a daughter no one listened to. I crouched beside her grave and laid the rose down. "I didn't save you," I whispered, "but I made sure they saw you." The breeze picked up slightly, brushing hair from my face like a hand I used to know. I closed my eyes and let the silence hold me, not with weight, but with presence. Footsteps approached softly behind me. I didn't turn right away. "I thought you might be here," Ophelie said. Her voice didn't sound like it used to. Gone was the polished, practiced rhythm. What remained was raw, uncertain. I rose slowly, facing her. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her eyes were puffy, like she hadn't slept for days. Her coat hung off her shoulders, too large or maybe just heavy with everything we hadn't said. She reached into her pocket and held out a folded card. I recognized the floral border before I even touched it. "She wrote you this," she said quietly. I took it without speaking. Our hands touched for a moment, fingertips only. She didn't stay. She stepped back and sat down on the bench beneath the old cedar tree behind us. I followed with my eyes but didn't ask her to go or stay. I opened the card. For my Verity, my fiercest truth. I'm proud of you always, even if I don't say it. Love, Mom. The ink was smudged slightly, like her hand might have trembled while writing it. Or maybe it had gotten wet. Either way, it didn't matter. It was the first time I had allowed myself to cry since the verdict. Not for justice, not for Silas. But for this moment, this piece of her that had waited quietly to be found. I folded the card gently and placed it in my coat pocket. Ophélie was still on the bench when I turned back. We didn't hug, we didn't cry together, but we shared something quieter. Some grief doesn't need to be named out loud. Later that afternoon, I drove across town, down the familiar street to the house I hadn't stepped inside since the fire. It had been cleaned, repainted, deodorized, but the smell of memory still clung in corners no fresh paint could reach. I unlocked the door and walked inside. The air was cold and still. Not sad, just empty. I walked upstairs, passing the hallway where so many of our lives had twisted quietly out of shape. At the end of the hall was the guest room, Mom's favorite, where she used to sit with her tea and a book, claiming the light was better there in the morning. I had brought with me a framed photo, one of the few Silas hadn't managed to toss or ruin. It was Mom standing by her garden, sun on her face, hands in the dirt, smiling like the world hadn't yet turned on her. I placed it on the windowsill, angled toward the yard. No plaque, no announcement, just a picture, in a place she once loved. As I left the room, I didn't look back. That evening, back in my apartment, I pulled out my sketchbook for the first time in weeks. The pages still smelled faintly of pencil lead and ink. I opened to a fresh page and began to draw. The idea had been forming slowly, an outreach center for women like her. Not a shelter exactly, a resource hub. Somewhere women could go before things got dangerous, before they were erased. I began sketching a logo, a hand open with a seedling growing from the center. Beneath it, Veritas, Latin for truth, her name, my name. I didn't need to win every battle. I didn't need to carry the entire weight of what happened. I just needed to keep truth breathing. Later that night, I lit a small candle. I placed it next to the photo I kept on my bookshelf. Mom, holding me when I was barely 2, her eyes already tired, but still full of love. I sat back, the flame flickering against the glass. I didn't survive the fire to stay silent, I whispered. Pause. I lived to keep you remembered. Sometimes the most dangerous lies aren't the ones shouted. They're the ones whispered in rooms where no one else is listening. Verity's story reminds us that silence can be a weapon, and breaking it is the first act of survival. What would you do if someone you trusted tried to rewrite your truth? If this story moved you, let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories just like this.
Hello, my name's Helen, and not long ago I thought I had everything under control. I was the lead architect on a city project I poured my soul into. Then one morning, my boss smiled, shook my hand, and filed my design under his name. The next day, I was fired for not being a team player. But it didn't stop there. They locked me out, turned my coworkers silent, and worst of all, my own daughter started asking why I cried in my sleep. Still, what they didn't know was, I kept every file. Now their building is cracking, the media's watching, and I'm no longer quiet. But how far would someone go to bury the truth? And who's really left standing when the dust clears? The overhead lights in the conference room always made everything look too clean, sterile, like a hospital. That morning, I walked in expecting a routine project sync, the kind where we updated Russell on progress and nodded through whatever he'd decided before the meeting even began. But today, the air had a different weight. No one looked up as I entered. No jokes from Sam in planning, no half-hearted wave from Rachel in budget ops. Just silence. Russell Kane sat at the far end of the table, hands folded over a closed laptop. His expression was unreadable. Not smug, not apologetic, just blank. Let's get started, he said flatly. I glanced down at my notepad, still believing we were talking about the Solstice project. I'd spent the last 3 months perfecting that proposal. Every weight-bearing point, every sustainable material spec, every detail. It was the most critical public infrastructure blueprint our firm had touched in years, and it had my name on it. Or at least it should have. Russell clicked the remote and the wall screen flickered to life. What appeared on it wasn't my design. Not entirely. The color-coded overlay of the load distribution grid looked familiar, only it was wrong. Very wrong. The secondary reinforcement I had flagged as unstable last month had somehow returned. The adjustment I made to avoid structural fatigue at the core truss? Gone. My hand went up before I could think. Is this the version that was submitted? I asked, voice calm but sharp enough to draw glances. Russell didn't even turn his head. It's the final version, he said. Approved and submitted. Let's stay focused, Helen. I blinked. That's not the file I finalized. He waved a hand. There were late edits. It's done. We're moving forward. The room stayed quiet, but I saw a few eyebrows twitch. People knew. They just didn't want to be the ones to say it. I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding. I didn't speak again during the meeting, but I was already rewinding the last week in my head. After we adjourned, I went straight to my desk. I logged into the archive server. Nothing. The file folder I'd created, Solstice Final Knox, was empty. Every file time-stamped within the past 7 days had been wiped clean. I moved to my sent folder. My email from 5 days ago, subject line, Structural Integrity Risk Load Core Truss B, was gone. I tried to restore it from my deleted items. Nothing there either. I called it. The guy who picked up sounded half asleep until I gave him my name. Then his tone sharpened. Miss Knox, your admin access was changed 2 days ago. You're now read only in the project drive. Who changed that? I asked. He hesitated. Request came from exec level. That's all I can see. I ended the call without saying thank you. That's when I felt it. Not fear, not even confusion, just something colder. A deliberate chill. Someone wanted me gone. I grabbed my coat and headed for the elevator. As the door slid shut, I heard my name. Trevor Hadley, junior architect, one of the few I actually trusted, slipped inside the elevator just before it closed. He didn't look at me right away, just reached into his coat and handed me a flash drive. Check the backup server logs. Look at the timestamps, he said quietly. You're not imagining this. I opened my mouth to ask more, but he was already stepping out on the next floor. That night, I sat at my kitchen table long after Maren had gone to bed. Her empty cereal bowl still sat in the sink. She had tried to get my attention earlier, asking what movie we were watching this weekend. I'd mumbled something about being busy and walked past her. Now my laptop glowed in the dim light. I opened the files from the flash drive. Every document bore my metadata, timestamps, version history, author tags, my revisions, my notes. Then I pulled up the last autosave of the deleted email. I'd exported a PDF version to my local folder, just in case. The warning was clear. Core truss at 17.2 m tension is unstable under current spec. Risk of failure without reinforcement exceeds 13% under high wind. My signature was there. My concern was clear. I wasn't being paranoid. They had cut me out of my own work. They buried me with my own design, I whispered to no one. I sat back in my chair, feeling every muscle lock into place. Not because I was scared, because I finally understood. I wasn't just a scapegoat. I was a liability they needed out of the way. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the screen. One contact stood out. Dana Legal. I didn't press it. Not yet. From the hallway I heard Maren's voice. Mom, are you okay? I swallowed the words I wanted to say and whispered instead. Not yet. The morning after discovering the deleted files, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the blueprints, my version, and the one Russell paraded in front of the board. I spent the night pacing, sorting through backup folders, rereading notes, trying to calm a fury I hadn't let myself feel in years. At 8:17 a.m., a Slack message pinged on my phone. It was from Meredith in HR. Russell wants a quick sync. Room B2, 15 mins. No subject, no agenda, no context, just that. I stared at it for a long moment, heart already in my throat. I knew what this was. You don't schedule ambushes on calendars. When I arrived at room B2, it was already half lit. No assistant, no coffee tray. Just Russell sitting at the far end of the table, flipping slowly through a manila folder. He looked up like he hadn't seen me walk in. "Helen," he said like we were about to talk about the weather. "Have a seat." I didn't. I stood across from him, arms crossed. He pushed the folder toward me with 2 fingers, then leaned back, fingers tented like this was just business, like it wasn't about to change my life. "Effective immediately, we're terminating your contract," he said, with no more emotion than if he'd been reading a parking notice. "Lack of alignment, resistance to internal process changes. This isn't personal." My throat tightened, but I didn't blink. "Lack of alignment?" I repeated slowly. "You mean refusing to co-sign a structurally unsound design?" He didn't flinch. "We need team players. Your last few months have raised concerns." He slid a bottle of water across the table like a peace offering. I didn't touch it. I had half a mind to ask if he'd rehearsed that speech. Then I did what no one expected. I sat down. "Did you tell the city board the blueprint you submitted wasn't mine?" I asked, voice even. Russell smiled. That smile, the smug one he used when he thought he'd won something. "The city doesn't need every name attached. We consolidate ownership for clarity." I stared at him. He was trying to rewrite the story while I was still in the room. "You'll receive a formal letter within the hour," he added. "Meredith will walk you out." And just like that, it was over. I stood slowly, pushed the folder back toward him. "You didn't even have the spine to delete my name yourself," I said. He didn't respond. Of course not. Men like Russell don't talk once they've decided someone's no longer useful. The walk back to my desk felt like dragging myself through thick fog. I passed people I'd collaborated with for 5 years. No one looked up. A few shifted in their chairs like my presence made them uncomfortable. One person, I think it was Lana from finance, actually turned her monitor to face the wall. When I got to my desk, Meredith was already there. She handed me a white envelope and a cardboard box. "I'm sorry, Helen," she said, but her voice held no conviction. She looked down as if she might disappear through the floor. "I'd like to retrieve my personal files," I said. "It has locked down all systems per protocol. You no longer have access." My ears rang, but I nodded. Of course. They'd planned this. Every step timed, every file scrubbed. As I placed the few things I had into the box, my mug, a notepad, a photo of Marin and me from her 6th grade science fair, Meredith hovered beside me like she was monitoring a flight risk. She finally handed me one last thing, a printout. "This is your final performance review," she mumbled. I didn't open it until I was outside, standing in the cold parking lot, Denver's skyline looming behind the building. The paper shook slightly in my hands. "Consistently meets expectations. Does not proactively lead cross-departmental initiatives." That's not what it had said 3 months ago. Back then, I was rated exceeds expectations in all areas. Meredith had told me herself in a one-on-one. She even emailed me the summary, one I'd foolishly never backed up. They didn't just erase my design, they rewrote who I was. I sat in my car for a while, the air thick, box on the passenger seat, review sheet crumpled in my lap. You think when something like this happens, you'll cry, or scream, or drive straight to someone's office and slam a door. But I didn't. I just stared at the building that used to feel like mine and whispered, "They want me to disappear." And then, as the last bit of sunlight faded from the Denver skyline, I whispered back to myself, "But not this time." 2 days later, I stood outside Kane and Rowe again. Same building, same glass doors. But I wasn't the same woman who walked out with a cardboard box. This time, I came early. I didn't want the pitiful glances or the false whispers. I just wanted my last few belongings and to leave with whatever dignity they hadn't managed to erase. I swiped my badge at the entrance. Red light. I tried again. Another beep. Another red flash. Behind the reception glass, the security guard stood slowly like he'd been waiting for me. He didn't speak right away, just walked over and nodded toward the far wall. "You'll need to wait over there," he said quietly, avoiding my eyes. "Someone's coming down to escort you." My face felt hot. I was being treated like a stranger at my own funeral. A junior admin I barely recognized from HR eventually came down, eyes fixed on her tablet the entire time. She didn't say my name, didn't even greet me, just walked ahead without checking if I was behind her. Inside, the air felt colder than usual. Or maybe I'd just gotten better at feeling it. My cubicle looked like a motel room after a quick checkout. Someone had already packed most of my things, badly. My sketchpad was bent, and the ceramic mug Marin had painted for me had a chip on its rim. I gathered the last of what was left: one potted fern, a flash drive I thought I'd lost, and the photo of Marin and me from the science fair. Her braces smile, my coffee-stained blouse, our matching lanyards. No one around me looked up. The clack of keyboards kept going. The occasional printer beep filled the silence, but not one person said a word. Across from me, Greg, whom I had coached through 2 certifications, shifted his screen slightly so I couldn't see it. Cowards don't always wear armor. Sometimes they just shrink behind Dell monitors. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I moved like I was made of glass, clear, fragile, invisible. As I turned toward the elevator, my phone buzzed. It was Lana. She was one of the junior analysts I'd mentored when she first joined. Brilliant, shy, too polite to interrupt even in brainstorm sessions. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to say something, but we're all being watched. HR told us not to talk." I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. "I get it." But I didn't. Not really. This wasn't about fear. It was about something worse. Acceptance. They had seen it happen, seen me erased in slow motion, and decided it was safer to sit still. I dropped the phone into my coat pocket and stepped into the elevator. Someone I'd worked with for 5 years was already inside. I remembered when his kid broke an arm at summer camp. I'd chipped in for the get well basket. Now he stared straight ahead like I was wallpaper. I offered a faint smile anyway, not for him, but for myself. Let them see I walked out tall. At the building's exit, the receptionist didn't even pretend to know who I was. Outside, the November wind had picked up. I paused at the curb, fumbled for my keys, and glanced down at the last box. It was lighter this time, literally and figuratively. They had taken my job, my title, the credit for my design. But they hadn't taken my name. Not yet. As I reached the car, another text came in. "Trevor, found something else. If you ever decide to push back, I'm in your corner." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then I typed back, "I might." I saved his number under a new contact, witness #1. I stood beside my car, staring at the Canaan Row Tower. It shimmered under the morning sun like it had something to be proud of. Let them think I was done. Let them think I was gone. I loaded the last box into the trunk and closed it with deliberate force. Let's see who they turn on next. By the time I got home, the afternoon sun was dipping behind the buildings in Capitol Hill. The apartment felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against your chest. I dropped my keys in the bowl near the door and noticed Marin's shoes already by the mat. She was home early. I found her at the kitchen table, fully dressed, backpack zipped, staring blankly at the muted TV. The local news ran a story with bright graphics and scrolling text, but the volume was off. Her cereal sat untouched. The toaster hadn't been used. "Hey, sweetie," I said gently. "Want me to write you a note for school?" She shrugged. Not a yes, not a no, just indifference. I wanted to tell her everything, that her mom wasn't crazy, that she was right to look scared the other night. But I couldn't pour that weight onto her, not when she was already holding too much. She eventually stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked past me without a word. That silence hurt worse than any boardroom betrayal. Later that afternoon, as I was sorting through emails on my personal laptop, rereading the message I never sent to Sophia, I noticed a missed voicemail. It was from Marin's school. "Hi, this is Miss Delaney, Marin's counselor. I just wanted to flag that Marin's been quieter than usual. She's missed a couple of quizzes and hasn't turned in her science packet. She didn't show up for homeroom this morning. We're not trying to alarm you, just thought you should know. Please call me back." I hit replay, twice. How had I missed it? I'd been so buried in trying to salvage my own name, I hadn't realized hers was starting to fade. When she got home, I tried to act normal. I asked how her day was. She grunted something about math class and locked herself in her room. Dinner sat untouched. That night I found her curled on the couch under the quilt my mother made years ago. Her phone was face down, her headphones unplugged. She wasn't asleep, just pretending. I sat beside her and waited. "You were crying last night," she said suddenly, voice low. I froze. She looked up. "You don't have to pretend with me. I know something's wrong." I swallowed hard, blinking back the sting. "I didn't want to worry you. I thought, if I held it together long enough, I could fix it without you ever knowing." Maren pulled the blanket tighter. "You don't have to carry it alone." There it was, the sentence that cracked me open. I didn't cry in front of her, but I reached over and took her hand. Small, still soft, but stronger than I gave her credit for. After she went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen counter. The house smelled like lavender from the diffuser she'd refilled, probably trying to calm me more than herself. I opened my laptop. Subject line, about the Solstice Project Confidential. I didn't know who I was writing it to yet. Maybe Sophia, maybe the city review board, maybe just to myself. But I began typing. I detailed the edits, the missing calculations, the internal warnings that vanished, my name being stripped. Then I saved it to drafts. I wasn't ready to send it, but I was ready to see the words on the screen. The next morning, as we drove to school, Maren barely looked at her phone. No music, no complaints, just quiet presence. When we pulled into the drop-off lane, she turned and looked me straight in the eye. "Whatever happens next, I believe you," she said. That nearly undid me. I watched her walk up the front steps, her shoulders a little straighter than the day before. If they weren't done trying to break me, then I wasn't done fighting. The Denver sky was unusually pale that morning, a flat stretch of overcast gray that felt like a warning no one wanted to read. After dropping Maren off, I parked outside my building, sat in my car a few extra minutes, and opened my email. At the top of my inbox was a message with no sender name, just a subject line. "If you talk, you'll regret it." No greeting, no signature. The body of the message was empty, just the echo of a threat. I stared at it. For a moment, my thumb hovered over the trash icon. Maybe that was the smart thing to do. Pretend I never saw it, walk away and keep breathing easy. But I didn't move. Fear crept up like a cold draft under a locked door, familiar, unwelcome. And this time I let it settle. Not to let it win, but to remember what it felt like, what it meant. The next message came that afternoon while I was making tea. Different sender, a burner account. Subject, check truss B. Attached was a grainy photo, clearly taken on site. The cracked underside of a support truss labeled and time-stamped, December 2nd, 11:47 a.m. A single line sat beneath it. "You know this collapses under full load? You built it. Kane's name is on the permit. But your hands made the bones." My stomach turned. This wasn't just paperwork now. It wasn't just politics or corporate theft. People could get hurt. I stared at the image until the mug in my hand went cold. Then I called Trevor. He answered on the second ring. "Helen, I can't talk long." "I need you to tell me the truth," I said. "Is it real? The truss? The crack?" A pause. Then, "It's real, and it's bad." "Why hasn't anyone stopped it?" "Because if Kane pulls the plug now, the entire contract implodes. The mayor's office goes public. Investors start asking questions. It's not just one job, it's a domino chain. Too many reputations are wired into that structure." I closed my eyes. "So what? Everyone just pretends it's safe?" Another pause, then softly. "That's the plan." After we hung up, I opened the draft email I'd saved days earlier. I read it again. This time I didn't hesitate. I updated it, added the crack photo, the message, and highlighted structural notes. I pulled up time-stamped versions of the real design, attached it all. Then, just before hitting send, I whispered aloud to no one, "This isn't about revenge. This is about responsibility." Click. It was done. That night, I sat at the edge of Maren's bed. She had just finished brushing her teeth and was bundling herself into the oversized hoodie she loved. "Hey," I said, "there's something you should know." She looked up, sleepy-eyed. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you things. Comfort, friends, safety. Marin didn't blink. But I want you to know, telling the truth is never wrong, even when the world wants you to believe it is. She stared at me for a second. Then, without a word, she wrapped her arms around me and squeezed. I held her tight, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was unraveling. Later, I cleaned up the kitchen, answered 2 job board notifications, and collapsed into the couch with the news playing in the background. Local politics, a snowstorm coming, a traffic closure. Then my phone rang, no name, just unknown caller. I debated ignoring it, but something in me clicked. I answered, a man's voice, low, measured. You should have kept quiet. The line went dead, but his voice didn't. It lingered like static in my chest. Low, threatening, certain. I locked the phone, placed it face down on the coffee table, and sat completely still. Outside, the snow had started to fall, a gentle curtain drifting past the window. It didn't help. Nothing about that call felt gentle. It was the kind of voice that didn't bluff. By the next morning, the snow had thickened into slush, crusting the sidewalks in gray. As I stirred coffee in the kitchen, my phone buzzed. Trevor. They fired Miguel, just like that. Walked him off site. No notice. My hands went cold again. Miguel was the engineer who sent me the crack photo, the one who risked his job to say what no one else would. Kane and Rowe wasn't just silencing me, they were scrubbing the narrative clean. I messaged Trevor. Is he okay? He replied, scared. They made it look like he violated protocol, but you and I both know it's retaliation. I didn't respond right away, because I knew what came next. Later that afternoon, a package arrived. No return address, just a plain brown envelope hand-delivered. Inside, a flash drive and a note from Trevor. This was buried in old approval archives. Thought you should have it before it disappears. The drive contained scans of the Solstice blueprint, stamped with Russell Kane's approval, and beneath it, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. Same font, same name. But the angle was off, the spacing clumsy. And when I zoomed in, the pixelation around the signature was a clear sign it had been copied and pasted from another document. Forgery. They didn't just take my design. They faked my consent to validate their lies. My breathing slowed. Not from fear this time, but calculation. I stared at the screen. This was the smoking gun. By evening, I had Dana on speakerphone. She was a labor attorney I'd worked with during a discrimination case 3 years ago. Sharp, unapologetic. She listened carefully as I laid it all out. The stolen design, the forgery, the threatening call, Miguel's firing. When I stopped talking, there was a pause. Then, Helen, you have them. I didn't answer. We're talking constructive dismissal, IP theft, retaliation, potential safety violations. If you want to press charges, we do it now. If you want to go public, also now. I exhaled. We go public. Dana's tone didn't shift. Then let's burn the house down. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder. The original design, my notes, the deleted email I'd saved, the cracked trust photo, and now, my fake signature under Russell's name. I compiled it into one PDF, clean, chronological, damning. Then I opened a new email and attached it all. Subject: Urgent, Structural Risk and Forgery Solstice Project. I addressed it to 3 journalists I trusted. 2 of them had covered construction fraud in Chicago last year. The third was local, tenacious, and already suspicious of Kane. In the body, I wrote, My name is Helen Knox. I was the lead architect for the Solstice Project until I was removed without cause. What follows is proof of safety risks and design fraud committed by Kane and Rowe. They didn't just steal my work. They endangered lives. I didn't sign it with a pseudonym. I signed it with my name. I clicked send. I sat back and stared at the screen. No bells rang, no thunder cracked, but something shifted. Later that night, as I folded laundry on the couch, Marin wandered in. She sat beside me, legs curled beneath her. She didn't say anything for a while. Then, Are they going to come after us? I met her eyes. They already tried, but I'm not giving them the last word. She nodded, not quite reassured, but not afraid either. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat that way, quiet but connected. I tucked her in early and kissed her forehead. By midnight, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Tweets, Emails, message requests. My post had gone viral. There was disbelief, outrage, demands for answers. Then, just before dawn, I opened the front door to get the paper. On the mat sat a thick manila envelope. No postage, no address. Bold red letters across the front, cease and desist. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like it was daring me to touch it. A clean white rectangle, unassuming, but heavy with implication. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee, hands trembling just enough that I had to steady the mug with both palms. I turned on the TV, not to watch anything in particular, but to drown out the kind of silence that settles when your life is on the edge of becoming something else. I needed noise, static, distraction, anything but the silence that had followed me ever since the post went live. But the universe doesn't always give you what you want. Sometimes it gives you clarity when you least want it. I hadn't even taken my first sip when the headline lit up the screen in sharp white letters. Russell Kane breaks silence on Solstice scandal. The mug froze halfway to my lips. My heart sank, then surged, adrenaline slicing through the fatigue like a wire through cloth. The feed cut to a high-production podcast studio, all moody lighting and sleek branding. Russell wore those oversized headphones, leaned back like this was just another casual conversation, a PR exercise disguised as vulnerability. The host leaned in, hungry, performing sincerity the way people do when they're selling you poison with a smile. Russell's voice, too familiar, too calm, filled the room. Look, I respect Helen, I really do, but some people aren't built for pressure. She got overwhelmed, made assumptions. It happens. Then he smiled. That professional, measured grin, the one he wore when investors were watching. Not everyone's cut out for leadership. The host gave a solemn nod, like Russell had just dropped a truth bomb instead of quietly assassinating my reputation. And then came the worst part, the comments. They were already pouring in like a busted dam. She's clearly just bitter. Typical disgruntled ex-employee. Of course she's playing the victim. Yawn. I set the mug down harder than I meant to. Coffee sloshed over the side, a dark ring forming on the counter. My jaw clenched so tightly it popped. He wasn't just playing defense, he was rewriting the narrative and doing it with charm, polish, and just enough plausible deniability to make people doubt the facts. My phone rang. Dana, I answered. Don't say a word yet, she said immediately. This is a classic PR play. He's controlling the narrative before you can. He doesn't even deny the risk, I said, pacing. He just paints me as unstable. That's the game. Undermine the messenger so the message doesn't land. But he's forgetting one thing. What's that? Dana's voice sharpened. Receipts. 37 minutes later, Trevor sent me a message. No words, just a link and a note. You're going to want to sit down for this. I did. The video was grainy, black and white, time-stamped a week before they fired me. Security footage from one of the glass conference rooms. No audio manipulation, no edits. Just the ugly truth, playing out in real time. Russell sat across from Meredith from HR. He leaned forward, speaking in a low but perfectly audible voice. We need her out before she starts asking more questions. If we move fast, she won't have time to react. Meredith shifted uncomfortably. We could cite misalignment, or maybe lack of cooperation? Russell nodded. Keep it vague, clean. I watched it 3 times, each time colder than the last. There it was, the whole strategy. Not just incompetence, not just betrayal. This was coordinated erasure. Premeditated, signed, sealed, and now broadcasted. They didn't even try to hide it. They thought they were untouchable. Not anymore. By noon, the video had already found its way to Twitter. Blogs picked it up within an hour. TikTok breakdowns were splicing the footage with my design files, timeline graphics, even audio overlays from Russell's podcast. The contrast was damning. The hashtags were spreading faster than wildfire. #Helen was erased, #Kane collapse, #Designgate, #women in STEM deserve better. I hadn't said a word yet, not publicly, but suddenly I didn't need to. The world had seen enough. Trevor texted again. You've got momentum. Use it. I tried pacing the living room, but it wasn't enough. I couldn't burn off the buzzing in my veins, the split between rage and vindication. I'd been holding my breath for weeks, And now everything was pouring in all at once. Noise, light, attention. Then Jenna messaged me. The reporter I'd sent the internal blueprint files to. Quietly, cautiously, weeks ago when I still wasn't sure if I'd ever use them. National outlet wants a live segment. Primetime, are you ready? My phone buzzed again. Dana. You have 2 options now, she said. Interview or lawsuit, but either way, you lead. I stood in the center of my kitchen, breathing hard. The envelope still sat on the counter. I glanced at it one more time. No. No more letting them shape my story. No more waiting for permission. No more letting someone else press record. I walked to my desk, sat down, turned on my webcam. My reflection blinked back. Hair a little messy, eyes a little tired, but sharper than they'd ever been. Let's start with the truth, I said, pressing the red button. And I began. Not to recover what was stolen, but to finish what they started. The video interview aired at 8:07 a.m., nestled between a breaking storm alert and a segment on political upheaval. Not exactly the prime slot, but the placement didn't matter. What mattered was that it was out there. I sat on the edge of my couch, hands wrapped tightly around a lukewarm mug of coffee. The screen flickered with my own face, an eerie, out-of-body experience. The lighting was neutral, the studio background clean and forgettable. But my voice? Unmistakable. This isn't about revenge, I said in the interview. My eyes held steady, shoulders square. It's about accountability. When shortcuts risk people's lives, silence is complicity. No tears, no theatrics, no clever sound bites. Just the truth, laid out with citations, timestamps, blueprint evidence, and a tone that made clear I wasn't asking for sympathy. By noon, the clip had done more than make its rounds. It had gone global. Architects from San Francisco to New York posted it with captions like, "Watch this," required viewing. Finally. Engineers commented on the structural concerns I'd raised, backing my claims with their own experience. A Reddit thread dissected every minute of the interview like it was a courtroom deposition. Even LinkedIn lit up, which almost never happens unless someone's announcing a promotion or pretending to love networking. But this was different. This was a reckoning. And then came the fallout. By the end of the same day, Kane & Rowe issued a brief, stilted statement. Russell Kane has been placed on administrative leave pending a comprehensive internal review. I read it twice, unsure whether to laugh or scoff. They hadn't even bothered with the usual, "we stand by our values" fluff, just clinical damage control. But the control didn't last long. That night, screenshots from Kane & Rowe's internal Slack channels leaked. Someone, likely more than one someone, had had enough. The messages were damning. Board members questioning Russell's judgment, calling his podcast appearance reckless, and openly discussing the firm's declining public trust. Has he jeopardized investor confidence? Time to reconsider executive leadership entirely? By Wednesday morning, Kane & Rowe was trending on Twitter, but not for any project. Kane and collapse, one user wrote. Karma and retribution, quipped another. And then, simply, #Helen was right. Employees began resigning. Not assistants or interns, but people with real authority, real proximity to the rot. 2 senior partners from my old team published open letters on Medium. One wrote, "I watched what happened and stayed quiet. That was a failure." The other, "The system failed her, and all of us." I read them both twice. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. There's no real victory in watching a legacy unravel, especially one you gave years of your life to. There was grief, yes, but not regret. Because this wasn't my destruction. It was theirs. Late Thursday evening, as I stared at an unread pile of emails, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then picked up. "Miss Knox?" a voice asked, smooth, calm, and vaguely familiar. "Speaking." "This is Joanna Berkeley." I sat straighter, the name sinking in. Joanna Berkeley, head of Berkeley Design Collaborative. Industry pioneer, sustainability guru. One of the few women who had shattered the architecture industry's glass ceiling without ever softening her spine. "I've followed your work since the Sanderson restoration," she continued, "and more recently, I've followed your courage." My heart thudded once, heavy in my chest. "I don't want to just applaud it," Joanna said. I want to work with it. I blinked. Work? With it? I'm launching something new. A firm that centers transparency, ethics, and sustainable architecture. People first. No shadow games. And I need someone like you. Someone who's lived the cost of silence to help me build it. From the foundation up. I didn't answer immediately. The words felt too big, too sudden to trust, like they belonged to someone else. I won't take silence as a no, she added, a smile evident in her voice. But I hope you'll consider it. I exhaled, then said what I hadn't said in months. I will. And then quietly, let's build it better. The next morning, another headline appeared across news outlets and finance blogs alike. Top investor exits Kane & Rowe amid ethics scandal. Backs whistleblower instead. The story named names. One of the firm's largest backers, previously touted on Russell's speaking circuits, had publicly pulled out. Their statement was blistering. Our investments must align with integrity. We support professionals like Helen Knox who prioritize safety, truth, and transparency. I stared at the headline until my eyes blurred. Then I opened my inbox. It was full. Dozens, no, hundreds of messages. From women in architecture, young interns, burned-out project leads, students, even mothers. One stood out. I watched your interview with my daughter. She's 11. When it ended, she turned to me and said, she didn't cry, she didn't yell, she just told the truth. We both cried after. They weren't reaching out to congratulate me. They were reaching out because they saw themselves in me. They were saying, thank you. That evening, I received a message on Signal, encrypted, private, and from someone I hadn't expected to hear from again. Meredith. I still have access to internal audits. I hope you won't need them. But if you ever do, I'm here. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, thank you, let's hope we don't. And I meant it, because this wasn't about burning it all down. It wasn't about making Kane & Rowe suffer. It was about what came next, about what could be built in the ruins. That weekend, I walked through a dusty, untouched office space with Joanna. It had exposed brick walls, old wooden beams, and floors that creaked with every step. Sunlight filtered in through tall, grimy windows, casting a soft gold across the concrete. It didn't look like much, but it felt like possibility. Joanna looked around, then turned to me. We'll name it together. I ran my fingers along the edge of a window pane, dust lifting into the morning light like smoke. I smiled. This isn't where it ends, I said. This is where it starts. The first days of January came soft, wrapped in gray skies and the hum of possibility. At Berkeley Knox Studio, the heat clanked through the old vents, and the walls still smelled faintly of fresh paint and concrete dust. We hadn't finished furnishing the space, no flashy desks or designer chairs yet, but I had a window, a sturdy table, and a coffee mug that said, "Design like you mean it." And it was mine. No one could take this one from me. Maren would stop by after school, drop her backpack in the corner, and spin endlessly in the only swivel chair we owned. "Are you famous now?" she'd ask with a grin that dared me to answer. "Not really," I'd say, "just louder than I used to be." One afternoon, I was writing project notes on a legal pad when Joanna walked in with the local newspaper folded under her arm. I didn't need to look at the headline. I'd already seen it flashing on my phone all morning. 10 Women Redefining Urban Space in 2025. My name was number 4. I didn't read the full article. I didn't need to, because for once, my value didn't hinge on someone else acknowledging it. Later that week, I found a cream envelope sitting on the studio mailbox. No return address, just my name in black ink, slanted and careful. Inside was a handwritten note. I was gaslit for so long, I thought I made it all up. Your story reminded me I wasn't the problem. I was just in the wrong place. I quit yesterday. Thank you for the mirror. It wasn't signed. Just the words, former Kane & Rowe employee. I pinned it next to a crayon drawing Maren made years ago. Us holding hands under a bridge labeled Mom's Project. Every now and then, I still searched Russell's name online. Nothing new had appeared for weeks. No statements, no new ventures. The last update was a vague blog post from a leadership newsletter about stepping away to reflect. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful about watching someone vanish into their own silence. But there was peace in the absence, like standing outside after a storm. One morning, I walked into the architecture department of a nearby university, guest speaker, ethics in design. I stood in front of 20 bright-eyed students, some barely 20, scribbling notes with furrowed brows. "We teach how to calculate load-bearing walls and energy-efficient lighting," I told them. "But we need to teach something else too, how to stand your ground when someone powerful tries to silence you." A few heads nodded. One young woman in the back raised her phone to snap a picture, and I let her. The bell rang, and I stepped outside into the crisp Denver air. When I got back to the studio, Marin was already there, curled up on the couch, half done with her math homework and sipping hot chocolate from a travel mug. She looked up as I walked in, set down her pencil, and tilted her head. "You look taller when you walk through this door now." I laughed. "That's because I'm not carrying dead weight anymore." We shared a quiet moment, her gaze watching me scribble something on a notepad. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't need to. She watched me in silence, then said in a voice that didn't quite belong to a child anymore, "You don't talk about what happened, but you don't have to. I watched you build something no one could take." I didn't answer. I just smiled. And I kept sketching. There's something about losing everything that teaches you what you never needed in the first place. If you're watching this and you've ever been overlooked, silenced, or made to feel like your voice didn't belong, trust me, I know that silence too well. But here's the truth. Silence doesn't protect you. Speaking up might cost you something, but staying quiet costs you more. I thought I had to choose between being respected and being safe, but I learned you can't build a solid future on someone else's lies. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to sign your own blueprints, not just in work, but in life. So if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own struggle, your own voice, your own fight, don't let it end here. Let me ask you this. Have you ever stayed quiet when you should have spoken up? What did it cost you? Or was there a moment you chose courage over comfort? And what happened next? I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. If this video touched you, even just a little, comment A or tell me which state you're watching from. And if not, tell me why. I'm here to listen too. And hey, if you want more stories like this, stories that fight for truth, voice, and justice, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next. Because the next story might be yours, and it deserves to be told.